So, hey everyone, welcome to episode number 78 of the Avocado Gamescast. I'm here with the Kappa,
Hey.
and I think this was originally supposed to be our Halloween 2021 discussion, uh, but it's past Halloween now. And as a Canadian, I absolutely refuse to do a Thanksgiving, quote unquote, Thanksgiving episode in November. Thanksgiving already happened in October. It's on a Monday, none of this Thursday crap. Um, so I guess this is our shut up, it's November, deal with it episode. Um, and it's going to be pretty low key. We're just going to chat about some video games as we always do. But before we get to that, um, there's a speed run that I wanted to discuss. And it's just happened this week. Um, a football player went for one of the world records in reputation loss. A man by the name of Aaron Rodgers. Uh, this is impressive. Like,
Yeah, it's funny too seeing the two sides of people I know from like different like parts of my life. Like one is like the football quarterback and the other is like the Jeopardy host.
yeah,
Kind of like, oh, that guy. And like both of them are kind of falling to like, oh God, this is so embarrassing. Like for everyone involved, basically.
Yeah, and like I'm coming at this. I don't really follow the NFL. I'm coming at
Mhm.
this knowing Aaron Rodgers from like Celebrity Jeopardy,
Oh yeah.
and then he went on to host Jeopardy temporarily. And people talk about Aaron Rodgers being this tactician on the field. He's a Berkeley grad. He seems very erudite and level-headed. And then this nonsense
Yeah.
happens.
I guess, it just shows you kind of that how you get from that I'm just asking questions, like part of, I don't know what you'd call it, like kind of like not necessarily anti-intellectualism, but almost like you refuse to listen to people just because you want to ask questions, and then you go down enough that road and you're kind of like doubting everything. You're
Yeah,
not thinking anymore, you're reacting, and that's a really weird emotional place to be,
it's weird in
so
that like you're asking questions, but you don't want to hear the answers
right,
almost.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, so this guy, I went from thinking, yeah, Aaron Rodgers is a pretty cool dude, in the span of like 48 hours, thinking, God, please stop talking. Please stop digging your grave. Uh, yeah, it's been really weird. I
Yeah,
hope he changes his mind.
I think that maybe the people that pay him might kind of encourage him to do that pretty soon. He's makes a lot of endorsements, and I think he's already been dropped by one or two of them. And I'm sure, there's two or three more who are getting really annoyed with asking or answering questions about why they're still paying him lots and lots of money to continue to be out there, kind of, you know, saying what he's saying right now.
Yeah, hopefully he changes his tune. So moving on to games that we're playing at the regular pace. Um, I've been playing a little game called Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy,
Yeah, I think you
which,
and like 80% of my Steam friends list.
yeah, so that came out, gosh, a week and a half ago now, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so for those of you not in the know, this was a linear action adventure game that features the titular Guardians of the Galaxy, specifically from the Brian Michael Bendis run of the comics. So that
Hmm.
would be the same kind of incarnations the characters are in the movies, although this is like a different continuity. So it's not those guys specifically, but same, like it's based on those same characters. Um, so you got your Peter Quill, your Gamora, your Rocket Raccoon, your Groot, and your what's the other guy, Drax,
Hmm.
and they're fairly similar to the ones you might know from the movies. The personalities are a little different. They're acted a little differently. I think, in my opinion, I like these characters a little better because there's just a little bit more nuance in how they interact. But like, uh, yeah, it's been really interesting to see the difference between this and the movies. I'm not really familiar with the comics. I haven't like got
Hmm.
into Cosmic Marvel, um, so
Well,
it's
let
been
me
interesting to
let
see
me
a
say
different
something.
side. Yeah.
Let me say I was going to tell 2018 Merve, hey, Square Enix is going to make two Marvel games, a Guardians of the Galaxy and an Avengers game, and one is going to be so bad it's going to tank sales of the other one. which one, which one do you think would be the bad one? Because I've been reading a lot of people have been nervous to kind of jump on this game for a little bit
Yeah,
because of how bad Avengers was, which to me is bonkers, right? Like, I
like
mean,
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I would have guessed that Avengers was going to be bad the
damn it.
second, like, in the sense that when you have a property that's that valuable,
Mhm.
you know they're going to monetize it up the wazoo, right?
Right.
You know it's just going to be ridden with microtransactions and all sorts of other just garbage nonsense because like it's too big to fail. They can't afford for it not to make money. And you've got a smaller property, you can kind of give it a little bit more. I don't want to say tender love and care, but there's a little bit less of that meddling and
And
less of
but
the yeah,
part of the thing that I think makes Guardians work so good on the screen is the charm,
yeah,
the comedy, the and notoriously games have trouble with that, right? Maybe accepting what like Double Fine stuff, but like
yeah,
games have always had a kind of a struggle with that almost the exact tone that Guardians has for the entire run of it of both movies, right? Like a very kind of like winking, knowing, charming, you know, goofy but not silly. It's a very fine line to walk, and the movies absolutely did it. But
yeah.
I think my doubts on the game were more, hey, can this make me feel like I'm playing Guardians the movie? And
So I'm gonna say no. It doesn't make you feel like you're playing Guardians the movie. It
mhm,
makes you feel like you're playing Guardians the comic.
mm, yeah,
It's like so the way the what I'd liken it to is I don't read a lot of comics, but I grew up reading Tintin or Tintins because I grew up reading them in French.
right,
Um, and it's the exact same feeling I got like reading Tintin. So like that
yeah.
like of going on this grand adventure in these unknown lands and meeting all these interesting people. That's the feeling I get.
Good. That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm definitely gonna. This is gonna be 100% one of those games that I'm picking up on one of the many sales. I'm sure, hoping
yeah,
comes out around the holiday seasons. But I've been very, very happy to see the reviews and even the reactions from my friends are like, "Hey, you got to get on this Guardians game." It has been surprising for a single player game to kind of, I guess, hit my you know kind of gaming knowledge of it. I thought it'd kind of be a one and done. And a lot of people are still into those single player games. Not everything needs to be what you did with Avengers and screw everything up. So yeah, I'm really actually very, very happy to hear of how it's coming together.
yeah. I will say it's definitely more for like the Uncharted or Tomb Raider crowd. It's
Hmm.
very much that kind of game, so don't expect
Sure.
something like Deus Ex with a lot of choice and consequence.
Hmm.
Um, and the combat system is almost JRPG-ish
Yeah.
in that you
Yeah.
have one guy whom you're controlling and attacking, but you're also giving commands to everyone else in your party. And you do like elemental combos and things like that. Like there are combo moves to kind of like say freeze an enemy and then punch them out, or like suspend a bunch of enemies in the air and then you send another one of your guardians to do like a multi-assassination attack.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit more. It's like Uncharted with JRPG combat is how I describe it, which is it sounds really weird, but it kind of works.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing I'll say about it is it's I can understand why people were apprehensive because it did not look good in previews.
Hmm.
Like it
Yeah.
looked really choppy, it looked really disjointed, and the combat doesn't look good in action. It feels
Yeah.
pretty good to play, but if you're just watching it, it looks really boring. And that's kind of a it's kind of a problem if you don't know how video games are made because a lot of games with really slick demos, like say BioShock Infinite or infamously Cyberpunk 2077, like
Hmm.
none of that stuff made into the final product, right?
Right. Right.
Whereas like what they previewed this with, that's in the final product.
Yeah.
It's not like a vertical slice that they made separately. That's in the final product. It just looks a lot more optimized now.
Yeah, and there's always been this thing. I mean, it's definitely true that there's games that look better in action versus like a screenshot, or like feel more impressive, I guess, playing it than watching it on a Let's Play, right?
Yeah.
So there, I've always taken graphical complaints with a grain of salt. I think what bothers me more than graphics complaints is art direction complaints, and this game had the right look for me. Do you know what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
I was always like, well, I'll wait and see on the graphics or the things like that. But I liked everything I saw on it, honestly. Preview wise.
Sometimes it does have, I think, a few problems with muddy textures.
Hmm.
So if you're looking for fidelity, this is not necessarily the game that'll completely wow you. But in terms of art direction, it's one of the best games of the year. And this is in a
Wow.
year with like I'm comparing it against games like Psychonauts 2 and
Wow.
Genesis Noir that had some of the best art direction I've ever seen in a video game.
Hmm.
And this is like honestly, it's
Yeah,
it's
and with the
so like every shot is so well composed when you go into cutscenes and how they kind of select camera angles when you're even moving your character.
mhm.
It's like I hesitate to call it filmic because that sounds like I'm putting down video games,
Yeah.
but it's like whoever's in charge of directing this is clearly absorbed a lot of the language of cinema and but in a good way.
Yeah, and I think there's always that weird transition of when stuff becomes normal in movies, then it becomes normal in games, and then it becomes normal in movies again, like that kind of like weird transition of stuff. Like I'm thinking about like I started seeing a lot of games doing this thing kind of like where there's a setting or like you go to a new location and it like puts like the letters over where you are now,
Yeah.
but kind of like typographically cool. It's blended into the mountains and stuff. Then I started to see that in movies. I'm like, oh, I remember that. Now I'm starting to see it kind of go. Then I went away in games. Now it's starting to come back again. So like little things like that. I think that we're in kind of a generation where games and movies are taking a lot of maybe not necessarily like filmic like that word, but maybe like a lot of like style directions from each other, right?
Yeah,
So
like
like
these aesthetic cues almost.
yeah, like this would look cool in a movie. I bet it looks just as cool in a game, and then sure enough, it does, right?
Yeah, and they kind of do that with the title cards. Like it's not diegetic, it's not integrated into the game, but they have title cards wherever your
Hmm.
location you come to. Um, and that's partly because not everybody's super duper well versed in comics lore. By the
Right.
way, this game has a pretty extensive codex, so it
That's cool.
explains whoever character is, what every faction is, every planet or location you visit, and on top of that has like the comics reference for where it first appeared in the comics. A couple of the things are brand new, like they're unique to the game. They invented
Mm,
some characters for it. And if you're not familiar with the comics, you would never guess which characters were invented for the game, which I think is the mark of something that really fits well into the established lore.
mm.
Um, and for all the alternate outfits, they have like the illustrator who first came up with the outfit and all that. It's super like you
That's
can
really
clearly
interesting.
tell that the people who worked on this were super duper into the property.
Yeah, like a labor of love type feel, and I think that was something that other people kind of reacted to Avengers and were like, this doesn't feel like a movie or a comic book. You know what I mean? It didn't feel like anything. It didn't feel like I was playing with the Avengers or I was an Avenger. It was very hollow, right? And that was a
Yeah,
lot of the feedback that Avengers got.
this like I would say it does take a lot of stylistic cues from the movies, but not in a bad way.
Hmm.
Um, like the Peter Quill is fairly similar to that of the movies. I'd say a little bit more competent. Rocket Raccoon is basically just the Rocket Raccoon for the movies.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a bad way, but
So he's basically Bradley Cooper.
he's basically Bradley Cooper. The voice actor's name is Alex Weiner,
Yeah.
and he's essentially doing a Bradley Cooper impression, but he's doing it
Yeah.
super well. Um, Drax and Groot are pretty different. Groot's a little bit more emotive in this
Hmm.
game, and Gamora's almost completely different, but in a good way, and not to say Zoe Saldana's performance is bad or anything. It's just a different take on the character that's also good. So
Yeah.
it's clearly taking inspiration from the movies, but it's still very much its own thing, which I
I think
appreciate.
that's smart. Yeah, I think that's the pathway forward for getting Marvel games back out of the gutter, right? I mean, like give us a little spin on it, but but the movies are successful for a reason. I mean, you can really look at kind of what goes on there and the moments. I mean, I don't know if I've seen a moment in my life. I don't know, maybe like George Bush throwing out the first pitch after 9/11, but I don't know if I've ever seen a moment in my life where more people went wild with it, like energy, than when Captain America picked up Mjolnir. I'm serious. Like it was like my theater went bananas when that happened, right? And you got to figure out that moment and why that hit for so many people. And if you can bottle that and put that in a video game experience, even like 10% of that, right? Like that's what people have always wanted from video games, right? Let me be that guy that lives that moment, you know? And I don't know why Marvel games have always kind of held back on that. It's weird to me. You know, they know what to do. They just kind of haven't done it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played the PS4 Spider-Man games. Like I've been told they're pretty good, and I have no reason to doubt them.
Hmm.
Um, but I feel like up until the Spider-Man games, Marvel's really had trouble generating a separate identity for their video game products.
Yeah.
It wasn't like DC that was like, okay, we're gonna make a DC fighter game and we're gonna make Batman Arkham, which are very different from what the movies were doing at that point.
Hmm.
But it does not necessarily have to be different. It's that the video games have to develop their own identity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think, maybe the ones that kind of came closest would be maybe the Lego ones, but
Yeah.
those Lego games kind of are in their own universe, right? But yeah, it's always been tough. Like I've always kind of thought of a lot of the Marvel games I grew up playing, like, the X-Men game in arcades, and like that could have been anything else. There was nothing X-Men about Welcome to Die and all the rest of that. But there's not a lot of like Marvel games that jump out to me as being
Wait, Welcome
super
to Die
memorable.
is from an X-Men game?
Yeah,
Oh man, I didn't know
check me
that.
on that. I'm 99% sure about that. Um,
Oh,
I think it's from the X-Men arcade game. I
it
might be wrong.
is.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
Uh, yeah.
but yeah, I mean, like a lot of those games kind of just were like, okay, well, what's popular? Beat 'em ups. Okay, well, make a beat 'em up with the X-Men. Okay, well, what's popular? Um, super violent killing games. Okay, make a Punisher game with it. Like it kind of was like whatever was popular, they found a character to fit the mold and then made a game. But Marvel can really do a lot more with their games, and their movies obviously took a leap. I mean, a gigantic leap. We talk about Marvel movies now like we talk about, I mean, literally any other blockbuster franchise, though, truthfully, none of them are even close, right?
Yeah.
So there's no reason their games can't at least rise above being, okay, well, we need to make a looter shooter. Okay, well, do it with the Avengers, right? Like, put that same kind of effort into your game studios, and man, like people could be talking about Marvel games like they talk about, Skyrim, or naming one about another million games about that, you know?
Yeah, I think, like, how do I put this? It feels like for a while, like there were early in the MCU, they were doing all these licensed tie-in games that have mostly been forgotten. And I think for a while they were just really scared to have different continuities running around.
Yeah,
Um, and DC just did it for
yeah.
the longest time and trusted that we could keep the comics, the video games, the TV shows, and the movies separate.
Mhm.
And Disney being very famously tightly controlling with their IP outside of Kingdom Hearts, um, I
No,
think,
I'm not going down that path. Stop
yeah,
it.
like aside from that, they're fairly controlling of their IP and don't like, they went and erased all the Star Wars extended universe stuff.
Mhm.
So, like, I think they just needed that prodding, and that prodding, I guess, came from the fact that, you know, they weren't making any money off Marvel video games. They just needed that product to say, okay, go out and do something different and just trust that the audience will know that this is a different thing. And like with Ultimate Alliance, it works fine.
Right.
It's like
Yeah.
you wonder why they don't apply those principles across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. And of all the games to not kind of like get a yearly carry on, I think people would have played the Ultimate Alliance style Marvel games forever. And then they just kind of tossed that one out. There was like a couple like X-Men RPGs that kind of hit, but toss those out. It's just so weird. Like we talk about like we shouldn't be surprised that Marvel's getting it right with video games when they've now we're on what 20 years of them figuring it out for movies,
Yeah.
So, like, okay, hey, finally, you got one. I mean, do that every time, and maybe the answer is a little bit of not always going to the same well with Square Enix. I like their games, I really do, but I think they make a very certain type of game, and I think maybe, I don't know how video game rights like that work. Like, I don't know if you get the whole MCU. It doesn't seem like you would have to, though, right? Like, you could just say, look, here's the characters you get to use, and we're going to go, sell the rest of these characters to, BioWare or something, right? Like, I
I
don't think
mean,
it's an all or nothing thing, is it?
that's what they're doing, right? Like EA had a Star Wars license, but then
Yeah.
they've effectively had to relinquish it. Um, like Ultimate Alliance is not made by Square Enix. I think
Right,
that's
right, right.
is that Capcom? Who makes
Oh, I have
Marvel?
no idea.
I mean, I can look this up right now.
Yeah. I don't
Um,
think it's Square, though.
yeah, it's definitely not Square.
Yeah.
It is
Ninja, Team Ninja.
Team Ninja.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then like whatchamacallit? Uh Square Enix takes charge of Kingdom Hearts and
Right.
they did Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy. And yeah, they you can give these properties to different publishers and different studios and then they work on what they're good at. Like Eidos Montreal is good at single player
Yeah.
games.
Absolutely.
And they've aside from the Thief reboot, which is a disaster, everything they've done since Deus Ex Human Revolution has at least been
Hmm.
pretty good.
Sure.
So, like, you can trust that Eidos Montreal is going to make a good single player game.
Yeah.
And what they did with Crystal Dynamics and the Square Enix executive, I forget what his name was, he recently admitted um, in an interview or a conference with investors that Crystal Dynamics was not the right fit to make
Hmm.
a looter beat 'em up.
Yeah. I mean, really, 100%. I was more concerned about that part of it than almost anything. I said, what in their history, uh, like, thought makes you think that they're going to be ready for? Because it sounded to me like they were going the full Destiny route with it, right from
Yeah,
the beginning. I think that was always the plan, right? But I mean, that's a complicated type of game to make. That there's a lot of, you have to get this out the gate correct as most as you can, but then also you got to keep it running. You got to keep it doing all these things. I mean, Tomb Raider was great, but like, I don't even know if Tomb Raider got much DLC. Did it?
it got like I've only played the first reboot Tomb Raider.
Hmm.
That got like Challenge Tomb DLC because the first Tomb Raider didn't have enough tombs in it.
Yeah. Just Raider. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I mean it's a good game, but it's like it has three puzzles in it or something,
Yeah.
and they're all optional.
Yeah. I
Yosuke
guess for
Matsuda,
me,
that's
like,
that's the head of Square Enix's name, who
oh, okay.
yeah said
But
that
I
Crystal
guess my
Dynamics was
point,
the bad fit.
being that I can't, like, I'm sure they probably did something DLC wise. I mean, nobody's that dumb, but like, I think that there's something about managing a live game like this where you're constantly iterating and improving. And man, how they set their whole community on fire. You know what I mean? With that whole, we're going to make XP harder to get and we're going to sell you boosters at the same time. Are you out of your mind? Like, you didn't think people were going to catch up on that? Like, it's shocking to me.
Yeah,
Like,
so they made the grind, and
mhm,
they made the grind harder, and for I go less a little bit under a year,
mhm,
they didn't introduce paid boosters. It was
yeah,
just they made the grind harder, so I guess to keep people playing longer.
mhm.
And then they introduced the paid boosters fairly recently.
And
So it
then,
wasn't even
when they,
like you could see the mercenary thing in real time. It was just a bad decision, and then like 8 months later, another bad decision.
you
Like,
know what else, like, is in that window though, is it went to Game Pass,
oh
right?
yeah, it went to Game
So,
Pass, and it was
yeah,
shortly after the Wakanda Forever
yeah.
expansion came out. Uh, no, a few months after, and just ahead of the new Spider-Man expansion dropping for the PlayStation
PlayStation.
platforms.
Oh, what a awful idea that is. That is just.
I mean, it's a
I mean,
slap in the
I
face
don't know how
to,
the rights work, but
yeah,
like, I would, if that was my studio, I'd say it either comes for everything or it doesn't come for at all. That's just, I don't know. One, you're making a product that only a third of your fan base is even gonna get to play, right?
yeah.
So timeline wise, does that even make sense? But two, everybody wants Spider-Man. He's one of the most popular heroes in the whole game. Like you gotta work that out.
Yeah, like
So
who doesn't want to play as
yeah,
Spider-Man, right? Like again, I didn't grow up reading comics, but I knew roughly three superheroes, and those were Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man.
right. And remember, this is also happening in a period where one, even if you want a PS5, you might not be able to get one, right? So, hey, you're the kid who was lucky to get an Xbox Series S or whatever, right? Well, too
Yeah,
bad you can't play Spider-Man on it. It's just so weird. Like every little misstep about that game is kind of what I guess had me worried. I shouldn't have been as worried because I think Eidos and Crystal Dynamics are two very different studios. I think it's easy to lump them in together and just say Square, but they're doing different things and doing up and downs across the board with both of them. But I really like everything I've seen of Guardians, and then Avengers. Just right out the gate, I was like, "There's something with this." I like. I remember. I want to go back to the old E3 episode and see what I thought about it because I just remember thinking, "This is not coming together like in a lot of ways." So
yeah,
it'd be
it
interesting to
felt
go back
very
and see.
much. It felt like, oh gosh, should I say this? It felt kind of like the porn parody version of it. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah. I remember like there was a Lord of the Rings RPG that came out. I think it was called like the Second Age or something like that. It was
Yeah,
very very fun, but like I remember like one of the reviews. This was I don't know a long time ago. One of the reviews was like you basically play as not Legolas, not Gimli, not Aragorn as you go through not Mordor to go like take pressure off the people who are actually doing stuff in this story. And that's kind of always like what tends to happen in these games. If you're not playing the movie guys, okay, that's fine. But then give me enough of a substantive take on it where it feels different. Like you can do that too. I think about like the Transformers games. Like
yeah,
meanwhile, you got these Transformer movies that are doing blockbuster numbers. And they're like, but this Michael Bay Transformer doesn't work in a video game. So instead, we're gonna almost cartoon it up more and release it as War for Cybertron, which is just riding the Transformers hype, but we're doing something different with it, right? Could
yeah,
There's 10 billion, Avenger stories out there. Like you could definitely have set it in a different age or a different planet. Just go crazy with it. But I don't know. I don't know.
yeah. Like, or even take Star Wars, where yeah, people want to be Luke or Han Solo or Princess Leia or whatever,
Mhm.
but you can make a good Star Wars game where you play as a brand new character. You just have to
Yeah.
take the elements and the essence of what that property is and put those in the game. And instead of making you play as like, Luke Skywalker's evil twin or whatever,
With two
you
U's. Just
yeah, you play as a character who you play as a character who belongs in that world and feels like an integral part of it. Like, you have to make the player kind of fall in love with that character,
Mhm.
but you have to take the elements of that property that people fell in love with in the first place.
Yeah,
As
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes Marvel's Avengers, despite taking the characters, didn't take what people loved about those properties
Mhm.
into the game. I say that not having played it, so maybe I really shouldn't
I've
judge.
I've put enough hours into it to tell you that I think every thought you're gonna have of that game is just gonna be literally you proving it true as you go through it. It's tough. I mean, I think they did try to do some stuff with Kamal Khan. I think that's fair. But I don't know. It was
I heard
a
she's like
curse
the
from the
best part
start.
of the game.
She basically is, and I think the reason she's the best part is because there's not a movie about her. There's not, you know what I mean? Like, there's no analog out there that I can go, ah, this would be so much cooler if she did this or sounded like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, it's just weird, right?
Yeah, and that's a really tough, like, I don't want to make it sound like this is easy. It's a really tough balance to strike. But when I'm playing the Guardians game, at no point am I thinking, wow, I really wish Chris Pratt were saying this,
Yeah.
or man, it would be so much better if I could hear Dave Bautista's take on this. And I like Chris Pratt and Dave Bautista in those
Yeah.
roles. So it's a testament to both the writing and the performances of these people that I'm like, okay, yeah, I like this take on Drax, and I want to see
Hmm.
more of this take on Drax, which is not how I expected I would feel going into this. So,
Yeah.
kudos to Eidos and the voice actors for pulling it off. What have you been playing?
Oh boy, I want to start with New World, and before I do this, I feel like I've done this in drips and drabs, but I want to establish my MMO. How do you pronounce it? Bona fides? Is that right?
I
Bona
think bona
fides?
fide is like the Latin way of
Okay.
saying it, and then like the way that we say it because we're dumb English speakers is bona fide.
Yeah, yeah, there you go. So I'm going to start with that. So I've been playing MMOs before they were even called MMOs. My first MMO was probably on a bulletin board. It's called Legend of the Red Dragon, right? That was my very first like MMO. I went on from there to something called The Realm Online. I played
Like
a bunch of that.
Hannibal Red Dragon or like
No,
mythical Red
no. So
Dragon?
I think so. What it was like a text based. Think like Zork,
Oh, like a
but
mud.
yeah, it's a mud, but they didn't
Okay.
really. I think it was called a mud at the time, but it was kind of like right at the cusp of what even is a mud, right? Like
Yeah.
multi-user dungeon, but it kind of had a feeling of that, but also like there was things that could happen. You could be killed in the inn while you slept. Someone could marry the barmaid, like things that happened that was a little bit different than just your average dungeon, right? Went on from that to the realm, which I think was oh boy, I think it was LucasArts. If it wasn't LucasArts, they definitely owed LucasArts some money for how that game looked because it very LucasArtsy kind of
It's
looked to it.
Robinson Technologies.
There you go. Went on to that one, bounced into EverQuest, played EverQuest, beat the brakes off of it, top 2, 3 guild for a long time. Went from there, went to World of Warcraft, top 2 or 3 horde guild. So I've got the MMO background, right? So when I tell you that New World sucks, I'm not saying this because I'm not someone who can grind and I'm not someone who sucks at MMOs. And as a game, there's nothing really there to keep pulling me back in. Um, it's got the
As a game,
crafting,
it looked a lot like Vermintide. And I
something
don't mean
like
that as a
yeah,
compliment.
it's got all the mechanics are there, right? And there's thought behind what they're doing and why they're doing it, right? But it's the simple act of logging into the game and going, "There's nothing for me to do right now." Is it's a stopper for anybody who enjoys MMOs, right? In an MMO, or I mean, even we could say like Destiny or any other live service game, right? Every day I log on and do something, I make my character a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to work on this. Okay, I make my character a little better. Do this. I don't really ever get that feeling with New World, and to me, that's like the big death knell of the game for most people who go from MMO to MMO, right? And we've already conquered a whole server for the most part. My faction's dominant. My character's like 200 in all the crafting. I there's some no life to the game, but honestly, I took a week off. I went to Florida. I haven't don't feel like I've been playing it any more or less than how I'd average out play an MMO, but I've never felt an MMO die so soon for me than when I got to the end game of New World. And I want to try to explain it because I think it's going to help people who maybe are interested and want to know why it sucks. It might
Yeah.
explain it.
Go
So
ahead.
when you reach a certain point in any game where it's like let's even Borderlands or any game where you're searching for gear, right?
Yeah.
At some point the gear set they say this is the max level you can obtain, right? In this game it's based on gear score. Very familiar system for most people, right? You get to 520 in this game and it says that's the highest gear score for now. But actually, you can get 600 gear. And the list of how you get 600 gear is like this nebulous list of, well, you can get it to drop in a dungeon, but you can't get it from the auction house. You can get it from killing these elites in the open world, but you can't get it from doing PvP. So there's this like weird up and down list of how to improve your character to basically the limit, right?
Yeah.
But the game doesn't have a lot of that in there, number one. And number two, the grind is totally random. And there's about 10 million random things that can drop on your armor, right? So what these people are doing is they're just doing grinding the same thing over and over again, hoping to increase an arbitrary number just so that they can get a chance at getting a drop of something that's of a higher random number that they can actually use. So people are going through hours and hours and hours of grinding, moving around imaginary numbers, right?
Yeah.
Some games do that. It's really annoying. That's maybe not a deal breaker for most people. However, in New World, in order to do the dungeons, you have to spend, I would guess, probably about 20 real hours crafting a key just to go in the dungeon, right? So now you've created a grind to do the grind that's still not even really the end goal of the grind because yeah, you've gotten this number to go up, but have you gotten usable loot? Probably not, right? Because the game has so many affixes that can roll on armor and weapons that at some point, like, you would need lottery winner level luck to get something that's higher level and usable and actually good for your character, right? It's bonkers. I cannot figure out how they released it like this and just thought this is a good system that people are going to enjoy. So what
And
it's
this is not free to play, right?
not $40. So it's not there's not a monthly subscription, but it's $40. And you get to that part in the game and it's like I've never seen a game die out so fast. I just
Yeah.
personal experience. It's just
So
been
like I'm comparing it to kind of like in my mind something like Genshin Impact,
mhm,
where you do have that problem in the end game where you need specific stats on specific artifacts for specific characters. Otherwise, um, like it's just useless gear.
right.
Um, but that's a gotcha system,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it
And
makes sense
so
in a free to play game. But in something I paid $40 for, I don't want to waste 20 hours trying to
well,
optimize my loot. You know what
and
I
think
mean?
about this. So there's a layer on top of this where there's no NPCs. There's no well there kind of is when we talk about the economy, right? Money, what you can do, you can't really sell gear, right? You
Yeah.
can salvage it, you can break it down in your inventory. What it gives you is the tiniest fraction of gold. I think I've got like 11,000 gold in this game, and if I break down like an of level blue, I think it gives me like 0.67 gold, honestly, and it gives you two repair mats which you can use to repair your armor and weapons from durability, right? So you're
Yeah.
not making money off of salvaging this stuff, right? But 99% of the gear that you're getting is either salvaged or going to the auction house. Now remember what I said about the gear though. If it's not perfect, you're not keeping it. Well, everybody in the game knows what gear is crap and what isn't, right? They know their own class enough, right? And remember, they can't upgrade their own watermark with gear from the auction house. So if I get a crappy drop, even if it's a purple god tier loot or whatever, if
Yeah.
I look at it and I go, no one's going to buy this from the auction house, it just turns into 0.67 gold and two repair mats. Even if I've been farming that all day, it's just such a weird system. And the PvP is okay. The wars have lots of problems. There's bugs galore. There's an immortality bug. There's an instant kill someone else bug. The wars are super laggy. Um, we've had problems a lot in our server wars, especially where it's like people stop moving until the game catches up and you just basically fall over. Um, and because they opened up server transfers, you could basically move a whole guild of people over to another server and kind of disrupt the economy there. So let's say you were on a super populated server, you made tons of gold, you take your whole guild, you move to a low population server, and you become gods among men because you've got the stuff that they couldn't get, and they just open up server transfers to everybody. So many weird decisions that just makes me feel like this was Amazon dipping toes into something that they're not going to stick with this game. They're going to go back to the drawing board, and there's going to be a new world 2 or some other type of MMO. It's probably going to have a subscription fee, but it's gonna have this shit figured out. But this feels beyond beta to me. I would not be 100% surprised if they did a Final Fantasy style relaunch for this game. Last week they shut down the whole auction house for 4 days because they found a gold dupe in the game. Now, I want you to think about what a gold dupe does in a game with no NPCs and an entire economy based around player actions. It's the economy is destroyed. Like the people who have 10 million gold, they can do whatever they want, buy whatever they want. There's no stopping them. And
Yeah.
the game's broken now because that person can go in there and buy up every iron ore in the auction house and set it for 5,000 gold. They don't care, you know? Um, it's such
Yeah.
a
It's like to
weird,
stop them.
yeah. It's what's weird for all like the capitalism in the game. It's like shit that Amazon like would try to avoid as a company in real life. Like, hey, don't let people corner the market on this stuff. We make sure we get our cut too. It's so weird. It's a disappointing game. I log in with my friends. I see that they're doing the same grindy bullshit, and I log out. It's been a tough game to let die, but I feel like definitely by the end of next week, I feel like I can pretty comfortably walk away from it. Say I got my $40 worth. See if it gets more interesting in the end. Um, but right now, I'm really disappointed with it as a game. One real weird quick aside too. Um, played this game with a female looking avatar and a female presenting name, right?
Yeah.
Annabelle Lee, because I like the Poe poem. It's been a total different experience for me than any other MMO I've ever played, where I, usually played male-looking character with a male name. So, get a lot of weird messages when your name is Annabelle. I'll tell you that. So that's also kind of made me like look for a name change thing, and they don't even offer that. So,
Oh
um,
yeah.
lots of weird stuff in this game. I can see it dying out. I can see, remember that Amazon owns Twitch, so I can see some streamers here and there sticking with it and getting people
I
hyped
just
for it.
don't feel like Amazon has capitalized on that. The fact that they own Twitch and could promote their video games that way. I don't know, maybe there are antitrust problems with doing that that I'm just not aware of because I'm not a lawyer. But
Yeah,
they didn't do it for Crucible,
yeah, yeah.
and
Uh,
like that thing died.
And I think pretty similarly. I think that's going to be. I think Crucible is a very good, like, at least Crucible. Well, at least New World got out the door, right? I feel like they got New World out the door, but I feel like it's dying. Like if I go to, I know this isn't a great 100% answer about how good is a game doing, right? So if I look up New World right now on Twitch, it's got 32,000 viewers, right? Sounds great, right?
Yeah.
20,000 of them are Shroud. And I like Shroud, and I'll tell you that his fans would watch him play, you know, bang on a cardboard box for 3 hours. They just love Shroud's content, right? He's got that magnetism to him, right? But
Oh, absolutely.
so when you've got 2 out of 3, so 30,000 viewers or 30,000 people are watching it, and 2/3 of those, right, are you know, watching Shroud. I mean, that's decent numbers, but let's look at Fortnite, which is a dead game, right? Fortnite, dead game. It's pretty much all you hear about, right? 69,000 viewers right now. That's, I mean, and they're all spread out all over the place, So I think it's kind of weird. I think I don't know. I think that they kind of always, Amazon Game Studios seems to misstep a lot in things that you would think they wouldn't handle, right? Twitch integration and all this other stuff. You think that'd be stuff they could figure out, but nah, that's where they're going to drop the ball. And where they knock it out of the park. It's a pretty fun game world, right? It kept me involved for a long time. Um,
Absolutely.
Decentish story. And I do like the setting. I think there was a lot of concerns early on that you'd be kind of like, colonizers invading, like indigenous people's lands and stuff like that.
That
It doesn't,
was kind of the original
right.
premise, which they understandably went back to the drawing board on.
Yeah, now you're kind of like a lost expedition. It's kind of like the feeling. You're a crashed expedition on this island that holds all this promise, but there's an evil force. And that's a kind of a cool, thing. I haven't seen much game like that and much settings in that kind of world. So that to me was interesting. Good feeling weapons. The combat's good. PvP's pretty good. But man, just watching the game, I think if you go around and like look at like Steam charts and stuff like that. I think it's dropped almost 80%, something like 700,000 people since launch, which is, I mean, when it launched like a month ago, that's drastic. That's like,
That's really
yeah,
dropping down the list.
yeah.
Like
So
usually games accumulate word of mouth, and they don't like snowball and become bigger. That's rare. But
right, right.
you'd expect that some of the people who are dropping are being replaced by people picking it up by word of mouth, and that doesn't seem to be happening.
No, and I don't think it will. I really don't. I think if you asked me today, should I play this? And I'm coming from, again, hardcore MMO guy. No, I would tell my friends to stay away. Um, like my Destiny friends are like, "Hey man, is it worth it?" I tell them, "No, man. Are you out of your mind? No, do not come to this game. It's got that addictive. It's got some of those good gameplay loops like a good MMO will. And I mean, from what I can tell, the devs do give a shit. I'm not saying they don't, but it's just I kind of think they're over their head. I mean, the game, I feel like they got the game out the door and it's running, and then they thought they'd kind of just sit there and wait. But I'll tell you, MMO crowds, man, they devour games. They don't play them. They suck out the bone marrow of a video game, and they get everything out of they can. And the goal is always, how fast can I get to end game? Because that's when it really starts, right?
Yeah,
And
and I can see that, like, say with Genshin, which I've played quite a bit of,
mhm,
and I'm a much more casual Genshin player. Like, I haven't even finished the story content, um, but like people devour it. They
mhm.
go through new story content in like a day. I'm like, don't you have jobs?
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Um,
I mean, truthfully, some of it comes from like having played so many of these games for so long. You almost start to look for, oh, this is the efficient thing. This thing. It might be a little bit longer, but it's more efficient because of X, Y, or Z. If I do this repeatable quest, it gives me 3,000 XP, and I only need 7,000 for level. So I'm going to sit here and do this until you know what I mean? There's a little bit of that type of
yeah,
gamer
I
in
think
MMO
it's
players.
it's almost like whether you treat it as a puzzle versus whether you treat it as a toy,
Right? Yeah,
right?
that's a good way
So
to put
like
it.
I treat Genshin Impact as a toy. It's
Hmm.
something that I'll pick up every few weeks just to mess around with for a bit, maybe advance the story a tiny bit. Uh, but for some people, it's a puzzle. Like, how fast can I clear all the story content? How fast can I optimize all my gear? Which dungeons I'm going to play on which day of the week?
Right.
And that's just not how I approach this game. I like
Yeah.
log in every few weeks, see what I can do, and then do it for an hour and I'm done.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely people who get there, and there's people who want to just log in, hang out with their friends. That's totally fine. But I even think for that, there's better games to do this than New World. And I mean, it had a lot of hype coming out. I don't think this was going to be like a nothing game. I think it was
Yeah.
like maybe the release of last month, I would say. And usually October is a pretty decent month for releases. And man, what a ball drop. It's not as bad as Crucible, I would say, because I mean they
I
were
mean,
framing that to be
Crucible
the
got
next.
unreleased.
Yeah, unreleased, yeah, and then canceled. That's tough. I don't know if I've ever seen that happen before, but um, yeah. So I mean, New World to me is. I've been chasing an MMO dragon, I would say, ever since probably Vanilla WoW, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm not making fun of like people's addiction, but honestly, I mean, it almost feels like that sometimes. It's something that just doesn't go away. That feeling, that discovery, you know what I mean? It never goes away. And then I haven't been able to recapture that in so long that every time an MMO, and I think there's probably thousands of people who are exactly like this, right? Honestly, they want that experience again, but that experience just doesn't exist anymore. It's so hard to make an MMO that feels new and fresh and does all the things you like, but has the UI that doesn't, destroy your experience. It's just so hard. It's lightning in a bottle, and
I
we
mean,
made a
if it
lot of
were easy,
excuses.
there would be a dozen WoW
Yeah,
killers on the market.
I mean, yeah, exactly. And New World is not going to be the one, and it sucks because I want WoW to die because I mean I'm
Yeah.
kind of in the mood for punishing Blizzard in general. But um, I know people have gone to Final Fantasy 14 and other games, but I feel like I've chased this MMO itch for so long across so many games, and I was like, maybe this is the one. And again, it's like the still haven't
Well,
found what I'm looking for. I guess I'm a big U2 fan.
yeah. If you want to relive the text-based days, there's always Kingdom of Loathing. That thing is still
Yeah.
running.
So,
Um,
I don't know if you had another one, but I did want to talk about another one. I know we're going to get a little long-winded, but if you got one, feel free.
yeah, I actually just wanted to mention one more, and that's a very different game from Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. That's Tales of Arise,
Yeah.
which is the new game in the Tales of series. It's your pretty much your standard action JRPG. Your the premise here is that there are two planets, um, Rena and Dana. Many years ago, uh, Renans invaded Dana and enslaved the population, and now you're essentially leading a series of slave rebellions, Spartacus style,
Nice.
across the planet um, to eventually overthrow the Renan rulership of the Danan planet. Uh, but of course, there's more to the story than that. There are wrinkles along the way. You discover a little bit more about um, the Renans and their secrets as you go. And as you go through the five realms of Dana, each of which kind of has a different facet of oppression, I guess you could
Hmm.
say. You kind of discover that not everything's as it seems. Uh, so, fairly standard JRPG plot with kind of a little bit more political intrigue than you might be used to
Yeah.
in a JRPG. Um, and I find it difficult to really talk about the game, not because I don't want to spoil the plot, but because it's the kind of game that doesn't really get going very quickly.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I'm, gosh, maybe 25 hours into it, and I don't feel like it's really begun almost. Like I have
Is
my
that
entire party, I have most of the abilities I want, but it doesn't feel like I've really uncovered anything mind-boggling yet.
so? I've got kind of a theory. I don't know how this would hold up. I've never really like explained this to anyone, but I think in a way, Final Fantasy VI and other ones, right? I think they set this kind of new idea out for JRPGs, just the whole genre in general. That like you've got to let people kind of almost get lulled to sleep and enjoy something, and go around the world, and then you pull the rug out from under them, right?
Yeah,
Like the world, I would call it like the world of ruin theory, right? And I feel like so many JRPGs now do this that
I
it's
mean that's
almost become
a
a standard.
staple of the Tales series,
That's what.
right?
Yeah, okay. So I didn't know if it
Yeah.
was a Final Fantasy or Tales or just a JRPG thing, but it sounds like kind of the same
Oh,
thing
it
going
might
on
have
there.
come from
Because
Final Fantasy VI for all I know. I'm not like I haven't delved far into JRPG history. Like my first JRPG was Persona 4. Um, so I'm not like a JRPG connoisseur by any means.
sure, I'm sure there's others that have done it probably before six and maybe after, but I just remember like that world of ruin feeling like, oh man, I'm in for it now. You know what I mean? But like now, I kind of like I expect it almost like when you're telling me about, hey, it starts out slow and I'm not really getting a feel for the plot, and I'm like thinking, well, it's probably because he's going to get to the equivalent of the world of ruin here, and it's just the world of
Oh,
ruin
it's
takes
been
you now.
spoiled for me that happens.
Okay, okay,
The exact twist hasn't been spoiled for me, but I know there's a twist. Like people have told me this, and sorry, minor spoilers for people listening, but yeah, it's there. Um, so, and again, this isn't me like really slamming the game or anything. It's a
yeah, no,
perfectly decent JRPG. Mechanically, it's pretty sound. Um, the combat system is fairly deep, but also understandable.
mhm,
Like in every situation, you kind of know what to do, although sometimes you can't do what is called for because the way it works that certain special moves counter. They're called boost attacks. Certain boost attacks counter certain moves by the enemy, but
mhm.
boost attacks have to charge up, and sometimes the right boost attack just hasn't been charged up yet. So there are a lot of times you're just kind of standing there like a sitting duck doing your regular attack because there's nothing else you can do. It's a little bit annoying as a honestly as a player. It's not the most well thought out system, but when it's working well, it's a fun system to use.
Yeah,
So kind of trade-offs here, I guess. Um,
I mean, I love the Bravely Default system, which obviously kind of has something similar, even maybe more. Just
yeah,
standing around getting destroyed because went all for it. But I don't mind that. I do kind of enjoy
yeah.
those types of battle
I,
systems.
I think it's a little different in a turn-based versus real-time game.
Mhm.
Like in a real-time game, you really feel when you're a sitting duck and there's not
Oh
much you
yeah,
can do. In a turn-based game, you're like, okay, yeah, I that is the opponent's turn. Cool.
it's just your turn. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Um, but it has some of that DNA. You're absolutely right.
Hmm.
That okay, I have to like run around dodging the enemy's attacks for a little bit while my squad mates charge up their attacks.
Hmm. And it's been a while since the last Tales game, right?
Yeah, I think it's the longest gap
I
ever
felt like
because
you were getting one a year for a while. I might be wrong about that. It just might have been how it felt, but like I think I used to play them. I want to say I played a bunch on DS. Like there was just like always like a new Tales game hitting on DS, and maybe the death of the DS is why it kind of slowed down. But
yeah, I think maybe the Tales spin-offs made it to DS. I don't know. I should know more about the Tales series, but the only one I've played before then is Zisteria, which is the
mhm.
one that everyone hates.
Oh really?
Yeah, I liked Zisteria. Don't tell anyone I said that.
I played a lot of man. I wouldn't even remember the name. They all kind of have similar names, don't they? Like what was the PlayStation 2 one? I think I played a lot of that one, but you probably don't remember it. But
Maybe Eternia, Destiny, Symphonia, probably.
that's it. That one was
Symphonia
big.
was the big one that
Yeah,
everyone
that was a
loves.
big one. Yeah, I remember that was like the I remember playing it and someone was like, "Yeah, there's like 50 of these." I'm like, "What?"
Yeah,
Trying to,
luckily they're
but
like Final Fantasy and they're not all connected to each other.
yeah, exactly. But like it, in probably when that came out, it was a long time ago. It wasn't like I could just go explore the back catalog anyway if I wanted to. But I enjoyed that one a lot.
Yeah, I think they have kind of a reputation for being these B tier RPGs, and to some extent it's well deserved.
Mhm.
Arise is, I'd say to some extent, a step forward. I'd say it's a half step forward. They've
Okay.
really the the art direction is phenomenal. They've really nailed that, um, and the animation is really expressive. They've uh, it's really well voiced, well acted. Um, and I think they kind of set up an intriguing premise. It's just that sometimes the writing isn't where it needs to be. The dialogue
Mhm.
can be really repetitive. Like
Yeah.
sometimes you'll have a cutscene and then you'll have a skit that explains the cutscene.
No,
And it's just like,
I know
I find
exactly what you
myself like
mean.
clicking through. I read the dialogue. I'm not even waiting for it to be acted out. I'm just like, okay, read it, read the line. Okay, read the line, read the line. I'm just clicking through. Um, and that's a bad feeling to have. Like I'm just kind of trying to rush through the dialogue um, as fast as I can read it. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I would again. I don't want to be too harsh on this game because I don't think it's a terrible game. It's just it feels like it could be so much more than it is, and that bums me out.
Where are you like? What do you think the playtime looks like if you had to guess?
I'm probably halfway through, a little bit under
Oh, okay.
halfway through.
How many
It's
hours?
not as long as Hysteria, I don't think.
Okay.
Um, and it's a little bit, I think the environments are a little bit more claustrophobic than we might be used to now in both Western and JRPGs.
Hmm.
Like, I'm coming off Xenoblade playing this,
Oh yeah.
and Xenoblade is known for its gigantic vistas. This is not that game. It's very much your standard semi-closed areas. It's almost like I'd compare it in scale to like Amalur almost.
Hmm.
I know people have been playing Re-Reckoning lately. Um, it's almost that kind of scale and that kind of level design where there are these kind of semi-open areas, but still very much your like interconnected semi-open area approach.
Yeah, I mean, because I just curious mostly because I think a lot of JRPGs have, in some way, I'm maybe outside of the Final Fantasy series. I don't know what those playtimes are looking like, but it seems like they've kind of decided that hey, we're going to be 50, 60 hour experiences from here on out. Um, I
And
haven't seen
sometimes
much
that's too
bloat.
much. Like
Yeah, I
sometimes
know, but
I want 30 hours, hit it and quit it.
yeah, yeah. I haven't like I haven't seen them getting to like, Western RPGs where, you're talking hundreds of hours now for stuff, but I also haven't seen them really make an effort to kind of get down to that, I think 20, 30 hour sweet spot. Because I know a lot of the story stuff, like you're saying, starts to get, okay, I get it, let's move along. It starts to grind a little bit more when you've been looking at that same stuff for, 30 hours versus 15, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think of the last JRPG I played that really justified its playtime.
Hmm.
And I don't know,
Stuff,
maybe
right?
yeah, the only one I can really think of is, and it's also the longest one I've played, is Xenoblade Chronicles 2.
Hmm.
That's a game that actually kind of had the content to justify its length. It's an absolutely massive game, and you know, I quite enjoyed it. But even games I really like say the Persona series, they
Hmm.
tend to drag,
Yeah.
especially in the last third of the game. And I'm saying this as someone who really liked Persona 4 and 5. It
And you,
just
you said those are still 50, 60 hours, right?
like Persona 4 is over 100. Persona
Oh,
5 took me, gosh, 125 hours.
oh
Like
man.
it came out in what, April of 2017, right?
Yeah.
And I finished it in December because like I started the game, I moved across the country
Yeah.
and I continued it. Um, Actually, funnily enough, I forgot to take my Persona 5 disc out of my PS4 when I moved across the country. And so
Jeez.
like I moved with the Persona disc in my PS4
I can't believe that.
and
It must be in there pretty good then.
yeah, it arrived intact. So that's how I know the movers were very uh careful with my stuff. So yeah,
I mean, I would guess like I'm trying to think of like Chrono Trigger's probably right at 30 hours, even
yeah,
if you probably stretched it. I would guess 6. Oh man, that's got a lot of like completionist stuff. I bet you could hit 50 if you did everything in the game. You know what I mean? Like literally like all the little weird things in the game. But that's probably for most people probably a 30, 40 hour one, you know?
yeah.
But
I think what it boils down to for me is just it's not a time commitment I want to make. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And I love getting sucked into a game. I'll put 30,
yeah.
40, 50 hours into it. It's just I don't want to be sitting there forever.
Yeah. Yeah. The
Like,
reason I guess I brought all this up though is when you're talking about those cutscenes, like that's the exact type of thing that was like, let's trim this stuff. And you know what I mean?
yeah, and I guess a defender of the game would say, okay, the skits are optional, but a lot of them aren't exactly in the sense that they provide important characterization and context and lore.
Hmm.
And it just feels like they could have trimmed some of this fat, then like it would have saved them on budget. They wouldn't have had to pay voice actors to record as many lines. They wouldn't have had to animate so much stuff. It just feels like they it just feels like they didn't trust the audience to follow what I think are fairly simple concepts, um, relating to especially relating to the politics of oppression and all that. It's not like it's writing a graduate thesis on this. It's stuff that you'll understand if you play the game, and it really evinces a lack of trust in the audience. That's what
Mm.
bothers me at the end of the day.
Yeah. I could
Um,
see that. I could really see that, like, kind of being one of those things where you really, really want to get to the point of like, especially like JRPGs these days feel like they're doing more philosophical things, dealing with like,
yeah,
like racism or like big. They're going for like they're swinging for the fences now.
and this game does not pull any punches in that regard.
Yeah.
It's very much like it's like up front. It's very much an anti-oppression kind of game. Um, but it also delves into a lot of the complexities and nuances of how oppression operates. But again, it's not doing so in a way that would that necessitates a graduate seminar in this material.
Hmm.
Um, so I think you can like I think it really just it's almost like it's not confident enough in itself. Like
Oh
it just
yeah.
needs to,
Oh.
it just really needs to make sure it's not being misinterpreted. So it just keeps repeating itself. And it's like, I get it, dude. I'm coming at this, like, I believe I'm coming at this in good faith. I'm not going to go on the internet and try to cancel you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I trust that you're trying to do the right thing. And you got to trust that as a member of the audience, I'm going to like get the message. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I wonder what do you think the standard JRPG age for players now is? If you had to just like roughly guess, I bet 30s. I mean, wouldn't you think?
I think, and this is gonna sound a little strange, but like a lot of Japanese media is kind of explicitly targeted towards people in their late teens,
Okay.
and it's what I don't think it's really caught up with is that um, nowadays there's no longer that stigma among young adults to kind of still be into otaku things. And that stigma certainly was there in the past, don't get me wrong. But like, people in the 30s in Japan and, North America too, are kind of openly playing video games now. And aside from maybe the Yakuza series, which has always been targeted to an older crowd, I don't think JRPGs have really kept up with the aging of their audience. I'm not saying
Ah,
there
okay.
shouldn't be JRPGs targeted towards teens. It's that I think there's a sense that adults aren't supposed to be playing these things, and which is fair. Maybe I'm just not the audience for this. Like I have
Yeah.
to kind of sometimes take a step back and realize, maybe this wasn't made for me. At the same time, I can imagine myself being, a snotty 18-year-old and feeling talked down to by this game, be like, I get it, mom and dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah.
So
Um,
yeah, overall though, I'm having a decent time of it. I wouldn't like warn anybody off this game. Just be aware that you're in for something that's a little bit generic and maybe a tiny bit condescending. So yeah. What's the other game you want to mention?
Age of Empires 4.
Oh
I feel like
yeah,
I've
that's out
gotta
now.
talk about it. I have been having a blast. I don't like. Don't get me. There's still some little tuning type things, but I can't believe damn they knocked it out of the park. They deliver on. I mean, basically to me the entire Age experience, which is um insane to say, and to kind of it pop out, you know, under the radar, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Well, I wouldn't say under the radar. I mean, I think there's the people who are excited about it, but I think there was a lot of people who were maybe cautiously optimistic and interested in it. But like, I'm here to tell you, they knocked it out of the park. I mean, it shouldn't be a surprise. Relic definitely knows what they're doing with
absolutely,
RTSs,
yeah.
right? So I think
And like AOA
basically
2 is still beloved, right?
yeah, yeah. I think this one basically doesn't act like 3 exists, but it carries enough forward, I think, from 2 that it's an age feeling game, but doesn't get bogged down in being like, we have to, follow exactly what Age 2 did. It feels like an iteration, which like I would put it more along the lines of like a Civ release. You know what I mean? We're like, hey,
Yeah.
you're still playing Civ, but there's enough in there. I think that really kind of man, I loved it. I still do love it. I've been playing it pretty much nightly, and I've been seeing a lot of reviews, and I think they're in the 8 to 10 range. I think that's a little fair. I'd bump it up a little bit, um, maybe like to like an 8.5, 9 if I was had to give a score to it. But the everything I think that is wrong with the game is stuff that can be fixed either through obviously DLC, get more civs in there, right? That's always, something that happens. Or, grinding out, I think just what you can do with some of like the map creators and stuff like that. But I think the base game, I think you're looking at about 50 single player missions off the bat. Like,
Oh,
and
that's
the
a lot of
missions
content.
are fantastic. You
How long
play,
does a mission take to complete?
depends. I mean, I would guess the average one probably about hour and a half.
Okay. Yeah,
They're
that's a
pretty
heck of a lot of content.
beefy missions. Yeah, and some of them are quicker, some of them are harder. But like that would be probably my average guess. But there's some where you just get an army and walk to the other side of the map, and then there's some where you unite 4 villages or whatever. But they've really kind of honed in, I think, on what makes these civs interesting and unique, and then the differences of each one, kind of not being so rock paper scissor, but like more like kind of what makes that civilization different in regards to how they work in the world almost, right?
Yeah.
Um, for example, the Abbasid dynasty, one of their big things, right, is that they don't necessarily need to build all these big buildings, right? That increase their standing in the world. As long as they can kind of build you know, one central building, and then you connect buildings off of it, you kind of grow a city, which really wasn't a thing in Age, right? So you kind of grow a city. The Delhi Sultanate, right? They don't really have tech the way the other cities do. You just kind of say, hey, focus on these techs, and they automatically get researched over time. You're not paying money and food and wood towards it, right?
Yeah.
Um, so things like that I think are really interesting, right? Um, kind of screwing with the balance a little bit for the verses, but it seems like the way the game itself plays is very cool. And the Mongols, oh my god! I mean, just
Oh,
pick up your
everyone
whole
wants to
city
be
and
the
move.
Mongols, right?
Yeah, just back it up, go. Like, so I think the English, they're your standard. You've played them before, you love them. They're the English. Chinese get a few little twists and turns, but they're pretty straightforward. Mongols, you can pick up your whole city. The Delhi Sultanate, they research totally different. French, almost all. I mean, the cavalry is insane. Holy Roman Empire, more based on religion. The Russians, basically,
Yeah.
they're more based on like kind of living off the land, like hunting
Oh,
and bounties and stuff like that. It's
huh.
kind
I
of
wouldn't have
cool.
expected that.
Yeah, a little bit less based on the war end of it, but more like, hey, this civilization survived a really tough land, basically, and they did it by adapting. So more stuff like that. So I'm enjoying it. The thing that I can't tell enough people about that I really like about it is you can find them on YouTube, but between each stage, so each stage is a historical setting, right? It's
Yeah.
the Norman invasion or stuff like that. It sets the stage for you. You play the stage, and at the end, it unlocks. Hey, this is why this was important in history, and then it also unlocks a video about like a tech or a building or a thing that happened at the time. Like one of them would be like crossbows, right? So you've unlocked crossbows in the game. So now it gives you a movie about crossbows, right? And it talks about, hey, crossbows, they were cheap, they were easy to make. They basically gave the power to literally anybody who could work one of these things. And it was kind of like an equalizer against knights. The idea that it could like pierce armor in mass wasn't really a thing unless you had like specialized metal crossbows. Those were more expensive. These were usually used by like trained, people. But the other crossbows, there were these wood things. You reloaded it by kind of like doing a squat, and you had like a belt with a hook down on it,
Yeah.
and you put it between your feet and like did a squat and like little stuff like that. I was like, this is great. Like it's like a
It's like a
old
history
History
lesson.
Channel. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're getting it every time you're beating a map, and it makes it feel more like you're playing history. And they use that tech that Microsoft has now for Flight Simulator. So what they do is they kind of give you a flyover, right, of the battlefield. And like it's what it looks like now. It's got a 7-Eleven on the corner or whatever, right? But then they superimpose over it what it would have looked like
Oh,
at
so
the
you get
time.
like kind of like a wireframe mesh thing going on,
Yeah.
or
Yeah, like little like orange like wireframe guys fighting over the battlements of modern day Paris or whatever. Um really neat tech.
like I'm just imagining like I don't know, a hoplite spearing some other dude in the like parking lot of a Best Buy.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Not that I
No, it's
think Best Buy has any presence in Greece, but
yeah. It's pretty funny though. I mean, like they do some cool tech with it, and it's like just enough to say like, yeah, like you can, this is modern Paris, but this is what it would have looked like with all these walls and stuff over it. But man, am I enjoying it? Even the little things, they've kind of toned down some stuff. Priests aren't as unstoppable, and you can't just mangonel rush your enemy anymore. But um, the bones of age are there, but they're trying to give you more of an experience as a faction. That's maybe why they didn't do 50 out the gate, because Relic kind of dabbled in some of that with some of their Company of Heroes 2 stuff, and it wasn't as well received as when they kind of stuck with the meat and potatoes. Hey, you can be the British, Americans, Germans, whatever.
yeah,
Once they started to get a little bit more diverse with it, it also started to get a little bit more messy. But man, I've been having a blast with it. I think Relic really nailed it, and I think there was a lot of going back to art style, a lot of concern over art style. Hey, these look kind of cartoony, but like get over it. I mean, it's more important, I think, in an RTS to be able to look and quickly tell what the
yeah.
unit
Which
is,
unit is
what it's
which?
doing.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. I'm not trying to get like, detailed down to the nanometer of it. So I think Relic does a good balance. I think they didn't go as into it as maybe some of their other RTSs with, defining, but I think that's okay. I mean, it's a guy with a sword with a big lance. I can figure out what he is. So um, I've been really enjoying it. And man, Game Pass. It costs me just whatever Game Pass is costing me, but um, it's been a fantastic little game just to kind of beat me out of my new world funk, I guess, here and there. So yeah, I really just want to talk about that for a little bit.
yeah. No, absolutely. It does sound like they've like, especially with these kinds of games that they kind of want players playing for a while. You
Hmm.
kind of want A, it has to have a compelling gameplay loop, and B, it has to have content to support it. It sounds like they've nailed both those things, and then I don't want to say everything else is just gravy, but
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
they've
it's getting there. I think
really,
it could get there. I mean, I think this could be that generational RTS people have been begging for. I think it can get there. I think Relic has a really good finger on what makes good RTSs, and the more they kind of keep pushing it, I think it's going to get there.
yeah, absolutely. So did want to mention some of the, like we haven't really had a chance, and I haven't been around on this round table for a while. So I haven't really had a chance myself to talk about stuff I played earlier in
Hmm.
2021. And like so I did want to mention some of the games that I played and a little bit about what I thought of them. Um, and like feel free if you've played these games to kind of chime in a bit. Um, and I kind of want to go back all the way near the start of the year and mention the Hitman series, which I
Yeah.
played for the first time this year. So I haven't played any like the older Hitmans. It's all the newer like reboot series
Hmm.
that IO started putting out a few years ago.
Right.
So I went through each one, Hitman, then Hitman 2, Hitman 3, one by one. Um, and for me, it was really interesting because I hadn't played this kind of game before.
Hmm.
Um, I've played stealth games, I've played games that have like emergent gameplay elements, but I never played a Hitman game, which
Sure.
kind of marries these two. So I ended up really enjoying it.
Yeah. I think that's I weirdly, this is such a good entry. I think Hitman 3 I think was such a good entry for new players. Even though it's kind of the end of a plot arc I think that they
Yeah,
kind of had going on. I don't think I think you probably put it all together. But
like the
I
plot really doesn't matter in
yeah,
Hitman,
the
let's be real.
this the step to step experience in the game is just so perfect. It's like refined to the 1 millionth level, you know?
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, even like,
absolutely.
is I'm not sure what I played three kind of weirdly. I can't remember how it initially released. It was kind of weird. Um, but I remember what's the tutorial in three?
The tutorial in 3 is the beach in New Zealand.
Okay, yeah. And I remember it did a much better job than the other ones. I think the other one was like a boat and the other one was something or other. But like
Oh,
I
it
think
was a
it
fake boat in Hitman
okay,
1.
fake boat, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it does such a good job of being okay, yeah, the fake boat where it's like a cardboard set, right?
Yeah,
That's what
yeah.
I'm thinking of. Yeah, so I think one of the good things about that is it's like you can do about 10 million things to get this job done. And it's interesting, right? Like you can poison the guy, you can push him off the boat, you can, kill him with a drill, you can hide him in a locker. Like all those little things I think for the new player is like it shows you in a tutorial that it's not like about like just sneaking and hiding, which I think separates Hitman, at least in my mind, from so many other stealthers. Where like Hitman has a play style where you can kind of go through and kill people one by one and still get a good score. It doesn't punish you for playing a little bit more like kind of aggressive or a little bit more hey, this is how
Yeah.
I feel like doing this map.
Like
Everybody on this boat's a bad guy. I'm going to kill them all. You know,
score-wise, it'll punish you, but you can still beat the level.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And then if you're wanting to get silent assassin level anyway, you've got to play pretty much a very specific style anyway. But that's more for like the score.
Yeah. If you just want to kind of go through the game, um, what it will punish you for doing is just like going guns blazing.
Hmm.
Uh, I think the only Hitman where you could go guns blazing was Absolution.
Yeah.
This one you really do have to be methodical,
Hmm.
but you can be kind of methodically sloppy, if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
exactly. Yeah. Or like it's
You
the
can
difference
improvise.
between
Yeah.
I screwed up and I've got to restart the map, or I screwed up. Let's see where this goes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I've
Like
definitely like screwed up multiple times and just sometimes I screw up really badly and I'm just like, okay, let's see how long I can last before I die.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
I just kind of go around shooting everything and seeing if I don't, you
I,
know,
I think
die.
the other game that kind of had that same feel to it was maybe like a Splinter Cell.
Yeah.
Like, oopsie, I got caught, but let's see how this plays out. I think Hitman does that really well too. Okay, I got caught, but if I play this right, I can make this work. A lot of other stealth games, they really, man, like they just dig it into you. Yeah, I screwed up. What do you want me to do? I got to start the whole thing over. I'm 45 minutes worth of sneaking into this. Give me a break, guys. Let's write a pathway where I can kind of come back from this. Um,
Yeah,
but
that's
yeah,
what I'll say. It almost has some of that immersive sim DNA in it where you can come back from a screw up and it almost encourages the improvisation.
yeah,
And like down to there's one level in Hitman 3 that I believe is set in Hong Kong or it might be Shanghai, I forget. Either way, it's somewhere in China and it's like really rain slicked and cyberpunky almost with all the neon. And it's just like that's when I realized, oh my God, this is the modern successor to Deus Ex.
Yeah, I
Like
I think you're onto something
I'm
there.
doing Deus Exy things. I'm going and talking to people and gathering intel. I'm, hiding in vents and behind garbage cans. I'm moving unconscious bodies around.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like I'm playing in Deus like and the original Deus Ex and Human Revolution, they both go to China,
Yeah,
right? It really just felt like I was playing those games. So yeah, if you want to play a like stealth game that also is kind of immersive simi, Hitman 3 is a really good experience in
I
that
think it's
regard.
a real good call. And man, I've got mixed feeling on stealth games, and I think Hitman is like just right in that side of the wheelhouse where you can still have fun, you can still do a little bit of crazy stuff, and it's not a save scum checkpoint game.
Yeah,
I think that's
absolutely.
a real good Hitman 3, especially great entry. I think.
Yeah. Um, I think personally um, I would start with the first one and work
Hmm.
your way through the trilogy. And the nice thing about that is you can actually buy the first two games as DLC for the third. So
Yeah,
you
that's
can
right.
actually play the first two in the Hitman 3 engine, and they'll look nicer and spiffier, and it's like the same price base pretty much. So might as well just do
You
that.
got to save that cash because man,
Yeah, it can get expensive buying all those games. So, I would give it a go. Um, Anything else from earlier in the year that you wanted to mention?
was one I wanted to mention because I think I might have gotten lost in it. I talked a little bit about Evil Genius 2 before, right?
You might have.
I might have. I think that one kind of just flipped under the radar for a little bit for me, and I did play it. I don't know how much I got into it. Um, I was kind of looking forward to it. It's okay. I've given it a lot more time, even if I did talk about it more. I've been playing a lot more, like in the last couple months. I don't think I've talked about it since, but um, it's kind of interesting because I feel like that style of game is not new. Don't get me wrong, right?
Yeah,
Um, I feel like they've been pumping a lot of these little packs and things like that out to kind of keep the game, interesting and stuff like that. But I wonder about like long term, like this style of game, I guess, right? This is definitely a single player, no whatever. We're gonna get some packs into it, and how much does the game change from pack to pack before you're like, okay, this is no longer a game that I bought or am interested in? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to explain. Like at some point, sometimes with some of these packs, it's not really what I want to do anymore. Like it's fundamentally changed the game, right?
yeah. Like when they patch a game to play so differently from what it was before. I
Hmm.
actually kind of have an example of that I'm going to discuss a little bit later. Um, but yeah, sometimes it feels like they transform a game through patches into something it was never meant to be.
Yeah, and Evil Genius 2 is kind of my example where I feel like I'm like you almost have to pay $5 a month for a pack to get the game that was really what you should have got in the first place. Does that make sense? Like, and each little pack is transforming the game just enough that like it's no longer the game I bought, and I feel a lot more of the pull. Like, hey, go go get this one because this is what makes the game more fun, and this would fit your play style better. This all those kind of things,
It
right?
almost feels like it's putting patches. It almost feels like paid patches.
Yeah, yeah. Paid patches is exactly how I describe it. And like, I mean, Rebellion's been in the game for a while. You know what I mean? I don't really have much of an opinion of them on a dev. I think they kind of, but mostly did the Sniper Elite stuff. But it's just kind of weird. Like, I really find myself just kind of pushing back against. I'm not necessarily against DLCs and expansions and stuff like that, but this one really feels like it's just constantly like the game you bought wasn't good enough. Like we're adding better stuff into it every single thing. So I almost feel like I should have just waited.
Yeah,
So when now that's a weird feeling of, am I getting excited month to month? No, I'm feeling like I got ripped off and I should have waited. And I don't know what like the like the line you walk for a game to feel one way or another. But I definitely feel like, this game.
not
Like
again,
I
right?
see it in
Yeah.
my list. I'm just like, I'll keep waiting. You know.
Yeah, I get that feeling sometimes with games that just completely transform how they play.
Hmm.
Um, and sometimes they transform for the worse, and you're like,
Right.
okay, getting this done quickly, I dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
and
Yeah. They
the
patch all the
game
fun out of it.
yeah, the game I wanted to talk about in that regard was Deathloop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I beat that a few weeks ago. Um, actually, before they released a major patch for it
Hmm.
that changed the balance of the enemies in that game. Um, so just to explain what the game's all about, it's a first-person shooter with immersive sim and roguelite-ish elements. Um, the premise being that you're in a time loop, and in each loop that you go through, you gain some knowledge that allows you to kind of set up the perfect series of events to
Hmm.
break the loop. Um, and the way it works is that it's not exactly on a timer. It's effectively your day is split into four segments, and in each segment of the day, you pick an area of the map to go to. You complete some tasks there that allow you to gain some knowledge, and then you can carry some of your weapons from day to day through the use of a resource called residuum. So you're carrying both knowledge and some resources from
Hmm.
day to day, all in an effort to set up the perfect series of assassinations that will allow you to break the time loop that you're stuck in. So the way this works, though, is that um, if you die in the middle of a loop, you lose the opportunity to save up any resources for the next loop.
Oh man. Yeah.
So um, you get two continues. Um, I forget what they're called, but you get effectively two continues, and if you die a third time, it's like three strikes you're out. Then you have to restart that loop, and you lose all the resources you accumulated in that loop.
Hmm.
Um, so what that means is that once you die twice, you want to return to your safe house.
You don't want to risk the
Yeah,
loss. Yeah.
you don't want to risk the loss. You want to, because then your continues are restored when you go back out again, out of your safe house.
Mm.
Um, so the problem with this is that, or at least the way it was balanced when I played through it, is it was just the right balance so that like 90% of the time you'd make it out, but it was harrowing.
Mm.
Like
Wow.
you do what you had to do, you had zero continues left, you just had to run for the exit, hope you didn't die, and you'd barely make it. It would be harrowing, but you'd always do it.
Mm.
And then they rebalanced the AI to make it slightly smarter and for people to hunt you, for the enemies to hunt you down more. And now what this does is it makes it harder to escape. So what originally was like the seat of the pants adventure now becomes something you have to do really methodically
Mm.
because you don't want to take the risk of dying. And that kind of takes the fun out of it, right? Because what's the criticism that frequently gets leveled against, say, Dishonored? You have to
Yeah.
play it really methodically, otherwise you get the bad ending,
Right.
right? But what was great about Deathloop is, there's no morality system. You, you're supposed to blast people in the face with shotguns. Like that's how
Yeah.
it works.
Yeah.
Um, and now you're telling me I'm risking losing all my progress if I use shotguns? Like that feels like
Mm.
they've unbalanced the really delicate balance they had going to begin with. And so I'm glad I beat the game before
You
um,
know,
that came out.
here because I haven't played it yet. I think I've downloaded, but I haven't played it yet. But you know what it has me thinking about is that something very similar was kind of Anthem's original idea for their game. Do you remember what Anthem originally was going to be?
Yeah,
You were
that
going to
you
go
were.
out like into the this dangerous area, get everything you can, but at some point you either have to make the call: do I keep going or do I go back? And if you die out there, you lose everything.
That's
Um,
essentially the premise of the DayZ guys' new game.
And I mean, I don't know because I don't think Anthem was a success, but the more I thought about that game, the more I thought this wouldn't work either. I would be very annoyed by that type of game, right? Um, so I was really like, yeah, this doesn't sound good. But hearing you say like you could potentially lose a whole run worth of stuff, man, whew, that's controller thrown against the wall type stuff. So-
Yeah, especially like if you lose it on the fourth segment of the day. That's the worst. Like, okay, you lose
Mhm.
the first segment of the day. Well, I didn't really accomplish much. I didn't accumulate many resources. Fine.
Right.
But when you're losing in the fourth segment of the day, that's when you're like, smash your keyboard, right?
Play the whole game. You play the whole day over.
Yes, you have to effectively play the whole day over, and you've lost all the resources that you accumulated in those days, in that
Oh,
day.
oh
Not, it's
man.
not like you lose all your resources. You still have what you saved from
Yeah,
previous
from the
days,
previous. Yeah,
but like you've lost everything from that run.
man.
Yeah, it's not. It happened to me once or twice, and when it happened, I was just like, ugh. And a couple of times it was like, okay, this was my fault. But once or twice it was like, that was a cheap death. Come on.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's always a little bit of that, and I think just arcane games in general, right? I mean, there was definitely in Dishonored moments I was like, "There's no way that guy saw me." You know what I mean? And you're just sitting there like, "There's just no way." And then a little bit of that cheapness, I think it's hard to justify if you're losing that kind of progress, you know. But then also, if that's the game's main gameplay thing, you can't really, mess with that, right?
Yeah, I feel like, and I don't know if I'm explaining this very well. It feels like in a game where the whole point is that you're doing this repetition,
Hmm.
you kind of want the experience to be as frictionless as possible, and you don't want to punish the player for taking risks,
Right,
right?
right.
Whereas like in a game where like Prey or Dishonored where you can save scum, then yeah,
Hmm.
punish the player for doing something dumb or for experimenting in a stupid way. But in a game like Deathloop, you really don't like you don't want to encourage is for people to do the same two or three safe, boring strategies over and
Yeah,
over again.
yeah.
That's the
And
death
and
knell.
that was one of those things one of the things I kind of faulted Dishonored for is once you had like a little thing that worked, it's kind of you could play the whole game with it. Like, your powers maybe got this or got that, but if you were just a stealther and you had the little crossbow that knocked people out, hey, that's all you need. You're done, Um
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird. It's how do you balance that in a game that, risk versus reward without feeling too punishing? Man, I have no idea. Like I don't think there's any real I don't know. There's any
Yeah,
real
I
way
don't
for
want to
me to
pretend this
enjoy
is
that.
easy, right?
Yeah.
It's a hard balance to strike, and I think Deathloop pre-patch struck that, and I'm really scared to go back to it and
Yeah.
discover that balance is no longer there. I mean, I've beaten the game, so I guess it doesn't matter. Um, but like, I'm a little bit scared to sell people on it because I enjoyed my time with it. I
Mhm.
think it has some pretty noticeable flaws. Um,
You know
and
what's weird is this is 100% a game I
yeah,
would enjoy on Game Pass. You like,
yeah,
I don't know
absolutely.
if I'd take a $40 chance on it,
That's
but
that's what I'm so scared to advocate for it, right?
yeah.
Like if they hadn't patched it up, I'd be like, oh yeah, sure, give it a go. It's pretty good. But now that they've changed the balance, I'm like, well, I don't know if the experience you're gonna have is the experience I had,
Right, right.
and that kind of worries me. Um, I guess there are a couple of the games we can talk about. I know there are a couple of things you played around the year you wanted to mention.
Yeah, I mean, there's one more I really just kind of wanted to get into. Like, as far as, did I talk about? Oh man, this is gonna be almost embarrassing to talk about. Um, there was a Dungeons and Dragons idle game that I played. I don't know if I talked about
IDLE or IDOL? Because both of those are
IDLE.
embarrassing for different reasons.
Yeah. Uh, this is Idle Champions of the Forgotten Realms. Um, man, I
God,
I
no,
have.
I like the weeb in me just wants a Dungeons and Dragons like Starlight Review kind of
I
game.
choose you, Drist. Yeah.
Yeah.
um, I don't know. I've got a weird relationship with idle games. Like I get them. kind of like on an intellectual level. I get why they'd be fun to like, oh cool, I'm gonna go check in and see what my guys have been doing, right?
Yeah,
But mostly like a phone game that I pick up every now and then. But I think I got this one on like Epic gave away like a free starter or something or other, you know?
yeah.
And this games feel like it would have been like the only Newgrounds game I played for 2 years if it was 1997 again. You know what I mean? Or like maybe not 2003 again. You know, that's the kind of feel of this game. But it's fun. It's got a little bit stuff. It's like really kind of confusing to like. I don't ever want to spend any of my resources because there's like the equivalent of real money stuff, and there's this, and there's that, and there's like this champion works with this champion, all that stuff. But they have a music pack that's maybe the funniest thing I've ever heard. It's like a guy who kind of like well, there's a guy and a girl who basically sing like parody songs, but they're all Dungeons and Dragons themed. Um,
So it's
I
like Weird Al, but for Dungeons and Dragons.
yeah, it's called the Bardic Inspiration is the name of it, right? And it's about like the Brimstone Angels. I guess they're like a Dungeons and Dragons group. I don't know about Dungeons and Dragons, but they kind of sing it like an '80s girl anthem. You know what I mean? Like girl power almost, like very like we're gonna get together and beat the bad guys type stuff. There's a couple other ones that are kind of like
Oh,
jumpy.
like almost like Spice Girls
Yeah, well,
or
maybe
like
more
Atomic Kitten.
like the Go Go's. You know what I mean, or
Oh,
something
okay, so
like
even
that.
older, like even more old
Yeah,
school.
yeah, yeah. But I
Okay,
really
my
enjoyed
I'm a
it.
little younger, so my references are like I don't know who else is gonna reference Atomic Kitten, but
But yeah, yeah. So I kind of got like I feel like I got my money's worth from this game, not even from the game, but just from the soundtrack. So the more I was thinking about, it, I was like, this is probably something Merv would be get kick out of. This like really weird songs about D&D players, like kind of because it's an idle game. It's kind of boring the moment to moment of it. But I really enjoyed the theme track from this. I wish more games would maybe be cool with taking themselves less seriously so they could do silly shit like this because I really, really, really like this.
I I agree. Like I feel so many games are just worried that
Yeah,
people are going to tune out. And I think, okay, like I want to be clear, a game can be too silly for its own good sometimes,
right, right,
and
right.
like undermine itself with bathos. But like video games are sometimes inherently silly, and I think that should
Yeah,
be embraced.
yeah,
Uh,
and this one does it, and it does it through the soundtrack, and that's neat to me. That I mean, you could do so many weird, funny soundtrack side notes in so many games, and I've seen it, like maybe like voice announcers and stuff like that. But yeah, I really like that.
yeah, absolutely. I I wish more games had like I wish more games put like jokes in the soundtrack or like integrated soundtrack
Hmm.
jokes better with like writing jokes. I think the last game I saw that really did that was, gosh, I mean, this is a 4-year-old game, so we can spoil it. The opera scene in Mario Rabbids.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
remember
that's a
that?
perfect example. Yeah,
Yeah, like that kind of thing where it's a perfect fusion of writing jokes and music jokes and gameplay jokes all kind of melding together into one pretty amazing sequence. That's kind of the stuff I like to see. Um, or like I try to think what other games have soundtrack jokes. Psychonauts 2 has one that I'm not going to spoil,
hmm,
but like it's doable,
yeah.
and I wish more games would take that leap.
Yeah, and this was like for an idle game to kind of have something like this, it's just the perfect mix of, what can you really do with an idle game? Well, have a funny soundtrack. It makes the whole thing go better. So, I mean, I think that was part of what I got for free, even. So it was even better. But yeah, that was a really weird, surprising like 2, 3 days I spent with that game that I kind of just kicked it around until I got bored enough with it. But the soundtrack was what made it, what would have been a 2 hour thing, a 2 day thing. So that was interesting to me.
Yeah, it's always nice to have those little surprises. Um, so I actually wanted to mention a couple of games that I like. I can talk about the big releases of the year, like your Psychonauts 2s and
Hmm.
your Scarlet Nexuses and Persona 5 Strikers, games that people have played. Um, but I think a couple of things that I wanted to mention that people probably haven't played too much of. one that I wanted to mention is a game called Golf Club Wasteland. Uh,
Yes, tell me more.
tell you more about like, okay, so there's been like this surge of weird golf games. I
Yeah,
haven't imagined this, right?
yeah, no, we had a whole little moment about golf games for sure.
Oh yeah, we
It's I
had
think it
like
kind of what it started like golf with your friends or something. I don't remember what the first was, but yeah, they've been everywhere lately.
yeah, and like I still play golf with your friends with my
Hmm.
friends, and I got them into it, and now my buddies will like message me like, hey, let's play golf with your friends. Um, they just call it golf. Like
Let's go play golf.
that to them is
That's
what
the
golf is.
default. Yeah.
And now I'm just like, hey, you know what's a COVID safe activity to do outside? Mini golf.
Mm.
So I guess it's gonna start snowing here soon, but once the snow melts in the spring, I guess we're all gonna go mini golfing together. Um, and it's purely inspired by the video game. So like weird golf games have had, I don't want to say a resurgence, I guess, uh, not a renaissance, but a naissance, if you will,
Yeah.
over the past few years. So you had like Golf Story, What the Golf, Mario Golf Super Rush just came out this year. Uh, Golf Club Wasteland is different from all those games in that it's effectively a 2D platformer in disguise.
Hmm.
Um, so it's a 2D game where you're navigating a golf ball through a bunch of obstacles, scrolling kind of left to right.
Mm.
Um, and instead of controlling the like your character, I guess you could say your character is the ball and you control it by swinging the ball. So I guess you could call it a turn-based 2D platformer.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and the way it the unique thing about it, and it's a game I describe as having the most Eastern European vibe of any game I've ever played. Um, I think I can't remember if it's out of Croatia or Ukraine. I'll have to look this up. Um, I'm probably wrong. It's gonna be like out of Poland. I'm gonna embarrass myself.
Poland
Uh,
does make a lot of games lately. That is
yeah,
true.
for sure. So the premise is that humanity has evacuated Earth because we just like destroyed it and made it environmentally uninhabitable.
Hmm.
So we all evacuated to Mars, and now what rich people living on Mars do, is they go back down to Earth as tourists in spacesuits and play golf on the surface of Earth. So like you play golf in the ruins of former Earth cities, and as you go through like this ruined Eastern European city, what you're listening to in the background is a pirate radio station that plays a mixture of like folk, spoken word, Eurodance and house, and like personal essays
Mm.
about life on Mars.
So kind of like they're giving you like lore as you're
Yeah,
playing golf. Yeah.
you get a mixture of lore and music, and it's just utterly hypnotic. It's one of the weirdest experiences I've ever had playing a game, but that is just so utterly compelling. It's a game that I don't even know if I can recommend because it's so weird. But if it sounds like it's up your alley, then definitely give it a go.
That part where you're talking about where you're controlling the ball, I thought was really interesting in a golf game.
Yeah, because that's effectively what is a golf game? It's a
Yeah.
turn-based platformer, which I
Ah.
know sounds stupid, but like it's effectively what you're doing. Especially golf with your friends.
Mm.
It ends up being um how do I put this? In golf with your friends, you don't take turns going, you kind of all go at once. And you can activate an ability called golf jumping. So like you just click and your ball bounces. So it effectively turns the game into a platformer that is also a racing game. So it's like a really janky version of Super Mario 3D World, I guess.
Hmm.
Um, it's hella fun. And what people have done is they've made like instead of your standard 18-hole mini golf courses, they've made these elaborate obstacle courses that have like par 99 on them, which is the maximum, and they effectively become race courses, and you just see you can reach the finish line the fastest.
Wow, that's a lot for a golf game.
Yeah, they've like the user content for golf with your friends is incredible. That's why this
Wow.
game has so many legs.
Yeah,
Um,
that sounds interesting. Doesn't even seem I mean, like, yeah, it's golf in all but name at that point, right?
yeah, it's yeah, I guess at the end of the day, what golf with your friends has become is because they've all these fantastical power-ups, it effectively becomes like fantasy golf.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's like you can't change gravity in real life, but you
Mhm.
can definitely play a golf game where gravity goes up and down. So
That's yeah, it's such a smart way to, like, kind of work in all that kinda crazy stuff. I love that.
yeah, and the realistic courses are still available, so you can play a realistic course and then kind of alternate with a weird course. So I'm enjoying this. I've never played golf in my life, by the way. I've played mini golf several
Yeah.
times, but
I've
real
been to the
golf,
driving range a couple times and, yeah, mini golf, but that's it.
yeah. So it's weird to me that I'm really attracted to messed up golf games because that's just not like it's just not an activity that I've experienced the real version of, just the messed up versions.
Yeah, yeah, playing, like, Mutant League football all day, but never
Yeah,
Madden, right?
like you've played Mutant League football, but you've never watched an NFL game. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, I'm a big fan of, like, Murderland Pirates or whatever, but, yeah, don't talk to me about regular football.
for sure. Um, I guess I can mention a couple more games that I
Sure.
should provide a take on, and then we can kind of call this to a close. Um, so what I wanted to mention that was kind of a pleasant surprise was It Takes Two.
Yeah,
I
it
don't know,
was
have you played it?
I have. I would say it's so hard to talk about this game without talking about the person you played it with. Does that
Yeah,
make sense? Um, because I loved it, and so many people had so many, like, kinda, like, negative takes about the story and stuff, but I
yeah,
played it with my wife and basically, like, a lifelong friend, and both of us we had similar experiences, it's not that crazy different, but, um, really enjoyed it, and there was a lot of weird kinda, like, almost negative takes to it, like, it's not this easy to fix a relationship," you know what I mean, or things like that, but, like,
oh, I totally agree. And
yeah,
like I'll say the only thing I'd really ding it for is that sometimes the writing wasn't great, but
yeah,
as like a gameplay experience, like play it's honestly the best implementation of two-player co-op I've seen in any game.
yeah,
Like it just so perfectly understands um, how to create a compelling experience that requires two players,
yeah.
but that's not frustrating or doesn't require a ridiculous amount of coordination. It's just something that you can kind of intuitively do.
Because I think there's been I'm trying to think. So there was No Way Out, which was a little dark. I mean, it really was. I mean, no
Yeah,
way around it. And I really didn't like spoilers
it's
for
not No Way
the
Out, it's
end of
A
it.
Way Out.
Oh, Way Out, yeah. Spoiler
Yeah,
for the
I was gonna
ending of
say
it.
there's definitely
But
they
like,
definitely find a way out in
yeah,
the game.
you spend the whole time working together with your brother. You get through all this stuff, and then at the end, it's like, okay, now you two have to, like, basically Mortal Kombat each other, and
Yeah,
one of you is the winner. Like, that is so antithetical to everything else that you've been doing in that game. Do you know what I mean? Me and my friend actually, when we played it, we both stood there. We're like, "There's no way it's gonna make us fight, right?" And, like, we thought maybe there'd be, like, an ending that's like, no, you both go back to jail together." You know what I mean? Just write some kinda ending, but no, one of you has to fight the other one, and, it's just I don't know, and then the other one I played was oh, man, We Were Here? I think that was the other one I played,
yeah,
and that one I really, really, really like, but it does the same thing. It's like one of you gets out, one of you doesn't, you know? And I don't understand why these, like, co-op experiences at the very end are so driven by sacrifice almost as the narrative rather than we got through this together. And I think that It Takes Two did that. You know what I mean? It was like, no, you guys did a good job together. Good job, buddies. I don't
Yeah,
know why the other two games were so hell bent on doing that, right?
I think like what I'll say in retrospect to it a way out, which is otherwise an experience that I really, really enjoyed,
Hmm.
is that it almost it's the experience that works because it's telling a compelling narrative and works as a video game, but I don't know if it's a compelling co-op experience, if
Yeah,
that makes any sense.
yeah,
Whereas It Takes Two feels like from the ground up, it's built to be an experience that two people play together, and it fundamentally understands how to make cooperation fun.
right, exactly. And 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 at the same time, doing cooperation so that maybe people who are or aren't at the same skill level can both do something that feels like they're contributing, not just
Yeah,
being carried. You know?
that's
Um,
that's actually the balance that gets perfectly right.
yeah.
I would say like I played it with a co-op partner who is new to video games in 2020.
Mhm.
Like he like I'll explain kind of what his background is. Um, his now wife, then fiance, is like an avid gamer,
Mm.
and so he kind of like didn't play as many video games as his now wife. I played a bit in undergrad, but like when he got older, he just didn't play video games that much. And now, like his wife, being a hardcore gamer, probably I guess didn't want to play like catch up with him, right? Like get him caught up to her level. So he's like,
It's your job. You got to get them
yeah, he's
back.
like, hey bud, uh, how would you like to help me learn how to play video games so that my wife doesn't kill me? Um, and so I was like, yeah, sure. I got nothing going on because it's a pandemic and I'm stuck inside. So sure, let's play some video games together. And so I come at this from having a lot more experience and having a little bit of a higher skill level. What I found that It Takes Two does really well is that either role you're doing, like they're not perfect substitutes for each other, the two roles,
Right.
but there's enough substitution that you can't carry your co-op partner, but you can kind of compensate for a skill difference a
Right.
little
Right.
bit. It's
Exactly.
just that exact right balance that if you're playing with someone who's a little bit newer to video games, you can kind of pull them through. If you're both new to video games, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But if you're both really good, or one of you good and one of you's kind of a neophyte, then you can both get through it together. And I think that's something that's so hard to balance
Yeah.
because it has to work for both roles.
Yeah. Because very rarely, I think, even like among hardcore players, that's not a very hardcore genre. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? It's not like, people who are fragging out on COD all day are going to step away to go play some, co-op puzzler, right? So it's a real interesting spot to be in to see these because I've said that the real market to me in gaming isn't competitive, it's cooperative. So many games I have such fond memories of are based on how much co-op stuff I did with other people, not competitive stuff, you know? I think like Rainbow Six Vegas 2, for example, I probably play with my friend basically every single night. We just get together and we just do like those terrorist hunt missions,
yeah.
stuff like that. Like it's a totally different experience, but it seems like everything's kind of gone away from even having co-op modes to the point now where it's like, well, what do you got? Okay, we got a single player and a shooter. All right. Well, or like a story mission and then the competitive and that's it. And they were jamming competitive into stuff like Mass Effect, like just weird stuff. I mean, I don't
Mass
know.
Effect was a cooperative horde
Co-op,
mode.
yeah, true.
Yeah, but like Uncharted, why does that
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
competitive multiplayer?
I have no idea. Yeah, I don't know. Um what is it? I almost said This Is Us. Not
Oh,
This Is Ellie and Joel and
oh, The Last of Us. The
The
first one
Last of Us. Yeah,
had
has a
competitive
versus mode,
multiplayer. Or the weirdest one. People forget that the first Deus Ex game had competitive multiplayer.
Yeah, yeah.
I played it a couple of times.
I don't
And
think I
it's
ever played.
serviceable. It's not like the worst thing in the world, but why does that game have multiplayer?
Yeah,
Which I don't
yeah,
understand. Um, but yeah, it's so much. It's so nice to have a game that integrates co-op in a fundamental and like essential way,
yeah.
and that's also just has a new gameplay idea every 20 minutes, and
Right.
a new gameplay idea that would be good enough to sustain a 3 hour indie game.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about like a Mario Party where instead of someone winning and beating the other people, what if you all were working towards a goal? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
What if you were saving the princess by flipping cakes? You know what I mean, or something like
that's
that.
like the
Like it
new
just
WarioWare, right? The
yeah,
new
yeah.
WarioWare
I
is
think so.
the
Probably.
co-op
There's a
game.
new one of those every week, right? So I don't know. Like it's very weird to me. It's just I think the weird part of me is that it hasn't caught on yet, really. You know?
Yeah, because like it's hard to find another person to play with and to have
Right.
to coordinate
Yeah.
unless you've got like an MMO guild running. So I understand why they don't have that many of these games. Um, but I don't know, whatever Hazelight's the name of the studio, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever Hazelight is doing, I don't know who's designing the games there. But they just
Fuck the
haven't.
Oscars guy.
Yeah, Joseph Fares. I don't know if Fares is the one who's like the lead gameplay designer. Um, but they do such a good job of not only like making a co-op game, but also just throwing new stuff at the player. So it's like it's hard enough to find good co-op ideas,
Hmm.
but a new good co-op idea every 20 minutes in a 15-hour game, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know how they pulled it off.
Yeah. And one that you're not like, oh, this sucks. I don't want to do this one, and you're stuck there for
Yeah,
20 minutes, and
and they're
yeah.
not like not 100% of them are winners, but if you've got a 90% success rate at
Yeah.
a new gameplay idea every 20 minutes to half an hour, like you have some of those brilliant minds in game design working for
Yeah.
you, you know?
That it's hard to do. It's hard to even make a mini game work for every game, you know?
Yeah.
There's definitely been mini games where I'm like, oh, this one again, you know? But I never really felt that way. Like the whole time I played, it always felt fresh, you know?
Yeah, it's just such an inventive game in so many ways. I loved my time with it, and I was
Yeah, same.
skeptical going in. I was like, this looks like it's got the wrong tone. I don't know how a co-op 3D platformer works. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, and like to be fair, I didn't really like the story it told in the
Yeah,
at the
it's
end of
sort
the
of,
day,
yeah.
but like it works so. It's just such an inventive, such a fun game that I wish everyone could have the experience of playing this for the first time because it's
Hmm.
just so well made. Um, Yeah, I guess that's kind of everything I wanted to mention. I
Yeah,
like
it's
there's
good.
some stuff that I'm going to talk about next time,
Same.
which I guess is going to
Yeah.
be our year-end
Yeah, I can't
discussion.
believe it's coming there already. Yeah. I
Oh
mean, there's some
gosh,
stuff
yeah.
right before the end of the year I'm definitely looking forward to. I think,
Oh
I mean,
yeah,
my,
there's like upcoming stuff too.
yeah, my game of the year right now is wide open. I mean, like, I haven't fallen, Age is probably, I mean, it's definitely the front runner for me, but I'm really excited to see what Halo and Battlefield and Jurassic World 2 even are going to
Yeah,
bring to the table. That I didn't know much about Jurassic World. What the hell is it? Jurassic
Jurassic
World
World Evolution
Explosion.
2.
Yeah, Evolution. Was bringing to the table. When I read that the plot summary for it, have you seen it?
No, okay, so I'm going to make a really embarrassing admission.
Uh-huh.
I've never read Jurassic Park. I've never
Oh,
seen any of the movies. I've never played any of the video games.
oh my
My
God.
entire knowledge of Jurassic Park is limited to semi-shirtless Jeff Goldblum. So
So you know the memes and that's it.
that's all I know about Jurassic Park. Um, I want to play Jurassic World. Like I got Jurassic World Evolution for free on Epic because they were giving it away. I haven't had the chance to fire it up yet, and I'm almost tempted to take the plunge at Evolution 2 because I love Park Simulator games. And I've been kind of disappointed with the latest iterations of theme park simulators.
Hmm.
Like I bounced pretty hard off Planet Coaster, even though it had some like compelling ideas in there. I played Parkitect and wanted to go back to it, but I just never kind of found the time. So I'm looking for a park simulator to really sink my teeth into, and this
Uh,
looks neat.
yeah. So not you probably have don't care about the story, but so basically the events of the latest movie are dinosaurs are everywhere. They're free. There's like animal rights groups basically like, look, we made them. We now owe them the same protections as we would any, um, you know, I don't want like any endangered animal that we protect. We got to basically protect these like them, even though they're dinosaurs. So you've basically got dinosaurs running loose, and now your job is as a United States like basically park ranger, to like basically figure out how do I get dinosaurs to integrate into Montana or Canada or like all these other places, like kind of. You build a park around them. You're still building Jurassic Park. It's not that crazy, right? But
Yeah.
you're doing it amongst like a natural backdrop of land rather than like an artificial island with no ecosystem. I thought that
So it's
is
almost like instead of running a zoo, you're running a national park.
right, right. And you're still wanting to get visitors, right?
Yeah,
Um, and you're still like, it's not like you can just do
but
whatever, but
then
it's
instead of like building the ideal enclosure, it's like, kind of akin to how do you warn people about the dangers of bears while they're camping?
right. And you're making sure their needs are met in a comfortable way, right? So that they're not trying to break out or whatever, or things like that. It's just, man, that is a clever fucking idea, I think. I'm really interested in that because I mean it's how do you make this thing that doesn't have a natural habitat have a natural habitat now? You know, I think it's a cool idea. So I'm really interested in that as a plot even, and then building the parks on top of it are just as good.
Would it be
Um,
essential to have played the first game or to have watched the movies to understand what's
no,
going on?
you know
Okay.
what a dinosaur is. I mean, you're pretty much there. I think the only thing there is a mode. I think it's called chaos theory, right? And what it is you try to unfuck the screw ups of each movie, right? So like
Okay, yeah.
if you don't know what the fuck ups in each movie like specifically were, it might be a little bit weird. But I feel like instead of like dealing with
Can
that,
I
um,
safely assume that everyone made the worst decisions possible?
oh yeah, 100%. I
Okay,
mean, like
great.
it's just like how does it get fucked up, like, right? I mean, it's crazy. Um, but yeah, I mean, like so, like there's each time there's like one event that starts the domino chain, right? And I think I haven't played it obviously, but it sounds like what the game is going to be like is which stage of the domino do you attack, right? Is it
Right.
preparing for the hurricane that shows up? Is it stopping the secret corporate espionage guy? Is it like there's all these little phases that you could kind of pull the trigger in?
You know that
Um,
that dominoes meme where there's a small domino and like
yeah,
successively bigger dominoes, and
yeah,
they have the first one labeled in the chain and the last one labeled in the chain. Well, that's kind of what I have in mind. And then you're
yeah,
trying to figure out what the intermediate domino is, and
yeah.
then
And it just
identify the right one to make sure that like the
it's
earlier
almost
domino
always
doesn't hit the
Doctor
later
Wu.
one.
I'll spoil that for you. He's always like kind of the bad guy in Jurassic Park. So,
Sorry, which
but
guy?
Doctor Wu,
Dr. Wu.
he's played by BD Wong, and
Okay.
he's kind of the like so his kind of thing is like, well, we made dinosaurs, but we can also make them better if we really want. So he's always the one kind of tampering with the genes and stuff like that. So, kind of the
What for
behind the
what
scenes bad
purpose is he
guy.
trying to make them better? Like
I,
as like
every movie it's kind of
service
different.
animals?
Well, like in one of them, like they basically start selling off dinosaurs. So like it's like Russian oligarchs want to, how they own tigers and lions now. Well, you know what's cooler than a lion? A raptor, right? So, but then,
Oh,
I don't want the raptor.
I was thinking he had like slightly more benevolent intentions that went
Oh no,
awry. So I was thinking like, oh, he wants to make Brontosaurus transport viable.
oh yeah. I mean, like maybe in the beginning, sure, but by the end, it's like I don't know, mix a T Rex with a Velociraptor, see what happens. Like it's very much like he's just doing whatever the hell he wants. There's a DLC for the first game called The Secrets of Doctor Wu, and like it's literally like I tried to make all these fucked up shit and they kept dying. So now you give it a shot and see if you can do it. So like you're like infusing like I don't know, it's Ankylosaurus or
Ankylosaurus.
Ankylosaurus, yeah, with a Diplodocus, like a giant long neck like it's just you're
So you're
making
just
these
like armor
insane.
plating a giant
Yeah.
long-necked dog. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
And it is. I mean, the whole thing screws up, right? I mean, like I think you put like you can make like Stegoceratops or like just other like weird dinosaurs you've always wanted to mix, you know. But of course, it ends up with you making the Indominus Rex, which absolutely destroys your entire park, right? So, um, but man, it's a wild game. And I saw someone complain. This is going to be weird. You've played a park simulator before, obviously, right?
Yeah, I'm a
The,
huge roller coaster tycoon junkie.
an actual review, right? And it was like um, the guy was talking about the game. He's like, I feel like too many things go wrong in Jurassic Park. I'm like, it's the entire fucking point. Like, there's a sandbox mode where, you know what I mean? You can turn all that shit off, right? But like, the point of Jurassic Park is things go wrong. It's if there was a movie where just the dinosaurs sitting there, no one would watch it, you know?
Yeah,
So
or like think about Sim City, where
yeah,
alien monster can shoot laser beams at your buildings.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, but like Sims are fun, but I think that there's certain types of Sims that need craziness. Otherwise, they just become like, like, have you ever seen that video on YouTube where the guy builds the perfect Sim City? It's like 3,000 layers built in a hexagon. If you ever find it, it's funny. But like, you can basically game that Sim City stuff to the point where you don't do anything. There's no disasters or whatever. So Jurassic Park needs that craziness because that's what makes it
yeah.
interesting.
I
You
think where
know?
I could see the criticism making sense is if it's really difficult to recover
Yeah,
from
to recover.
those disasters, then I can see it I can see it being a problem of game balance or difficulty.
Mhm.
But you kind of want things to go slightly awry.
Right, the craziness. That's
Yeah,
when the,
at least you want like your T-Rex in an enclosure to occasionally eat a dinosaur it's not
yeah,
supposed to eat, right?
or a tourist. I mean,
I'm not picky. Just like putting its head over the enclosure fence and like grabbing a kid by the head. Um, yeah. Um, so a couple of games that I'm looking forward to for the rest of the year. I think the big ones for me are Solar Ash and Halo Infinite.
yeah.
Solar Ash it has this really striking art style that's kind of polygonal and bright orange and pinks and stuff. Made by Heart Machine, same folks who made Hyperlight Drifter,
Hmm.
although apparently this is supposed to be a lot easier. So, it is my jam, that kind of
Yeah.
action adventure platformer thing.
Looks gorgeous too.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we'll see how that turns out. Halo Infinite's kind of a big question mark for me. As someone who
Yeah.
went
I
through
mean,
the Halo series -5 because that's not on PC.
right.
Um, went through the entire Halo series last year and like honestly really loved it. Um, I'm I'm like I'm like really excited but also really worried because I
You know,
love the core gameplay loop, but also I don't know if I want Halo does Far Cry.
right, right. I think what's got me most optimistic about everything so far, Halo Infinite, is one thing. It's that their battle pass looks like the greatest battle pass I've ever seen in a game. I mean, battle passes are at this point, right? I mean, we're kind of used to them. We know what they should and shouldn't have and what to expect like that.
Yeah.
But theirs feels very generous. They're around 3 months, which is about what most of them are. But it looks like they're throwing stuff at you, pretty routinely. Um, and
Yeah, if they
I
want to
think,
make the multiplayer portion free to play,
yeah,
then you kind of need that player base. And it
yeah,
becomes like, they're going to be supported by like 10% of players.
right, right,
So like you need um to be generous enough to the non-paying players that they keep coming back.
yep,
Otherwise, you just have unpopulated servers.
yeah. And one of the things I really liked about their battle pass plans is that you can go back and play old battle passes as well. Um, I think that's really interesting, and I expect Halo to kind of be managed, right? Like it's not the kind of shooter like I don't know. There's shooters where you just drop it and that's it, right? I always feel with Halo, you're always getting those little tweaks and turns and stuff like that. Um, that kind of is like the experience is tailored to you, at
Yeah,
some point, whatever you're playing. And there's no reason for me to not think that. I mean, Halo's going to knock it out of the park. I really think it is. Like, but it's going to come down to whether or not the people feel with it. It's the shooter that they stay with. Because right now there's not one of those. I don't think there is. The COD kids hate the new COD. That came out 2 days ago. They're already,
Vanguard.
um,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't.
like that is, I think a lot of the hatred is in part that. So a couple of things. One, World War II again feels overdone.
Yeah.
And the second problem is that they haven't really innovated very much
Mhm.
in the multiplayer. And
Yeah. This one is
and
the
the third
same.
problem is residual like frustration and anger over the Activision scandal.
Right.
Like I know the stereotype of a COD gamer is like this like angry bro who doesn't care about justice or whatnot,
Yeah.
but a
Yeah.
lot of people who love COD are still extremely angry about what went down at Activision,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like they're gonna be angry that um, like you couple that with a game that isn't like the best COD ever, and
Right.
yeah, that anger is gonna spill out for sure.
And I think this one feels a lot of like, hey, this feels like what we just played, just reskinned weapons. These are just World War II weapons instead of, the other weapons. And I think that's tough for people, to kind of deal with that year after year after year because they want to love the series, right? But
Yeah, absolutely.
man, it's tough. And then Battlefield, I think will get a little bit of the regular juice it gets, but I just don't know, like, what's the shooter that people stick with? Because it seems like we've been missing that for a little bit, you know? Um, Maybe it is
Absolutely.
Halo.
We'll see. I don't know. Halo 4 and 5 were both controversial for various
Mhm.
reasons. 4, I'll say 4 took a little bit of getting used to
Yeah,
when I started playing it. It plays a little differently. The gun feels a little different. Some of the weapons play very differently from their original trilogy counterparts.
right.
So I get why there was some controversy there. Um, but once you get past that, I think it's honestly the most mechanically sound of the Halos. Um, I also understand that the Prometheans aren't that fun to fight.
No, they aren't. It's hard because I feel like they've told the story with the Covenant, and that story needed to go where it went to. But I don't think the Prometheans or the Forerunners have really even kind of caught on, you know?
Yeah.
So,
So I can understand why people are a little bit, apprehensive about what 343 is going to do.
mhm,
And I come with this as someone who really, really liked Halo 4
yeah.
and thinks it has some of the best missions in the
I
entire
was
series.
I was pretty neutral on 5, honestly. I mean, I didn't hate it, didn't love it, but the one thing I would say is like it feels like we haven't gotten a lot of Master Chief. You know what I mean? In Halo recently. Like I think that's maybe what some of the reactions are towards is like you kind of been withholding, you know? Like they've been withholding the thing I think a lot of people want, which is, Cortana and Master Chief. You get a lot. I mean, you get a fair amount, but I
Like,
really do think that, you know,
I,
that's
I,
what people are pushing for.
I think that Halo has to be more than just Cortana and Master Chief at this point.
Mm,
Like, I feel
if they
like
do, they need to set it up better than what 5 did. I'll say that.
okay, like again, I haven't played 5
Yeah.
unfortunately because it's not on PC. So I totally get that, if you don't set up the if you don't set up the characters in a way that people care about, then I totally get why people are not gonna
Yeah, if you
like
don't
catch
set
on
it
to
up
them.
and then you don't give it to them, it's kind of a weird, you know what I mean? Like it's a balancing act. Like, yeah, you want to tell a story without Master Chief, that's fine. And they've done it for ODST's made my favorite Halo game, and Reach, fantastic game. Neither one have
Yeah,
Master Chief, right? So
yeah,
they
I
can
love
definitely,
Reach.
yeah, they can definitely do it. I think it's just going to be one of those things where, like, at some point, you know, get to the story where you feel like it's going to be in a good spot and then move on it from there, But I don't think they did that with 5, is how I'd put it.
I think, and this is gonna be a little unfair. Um, I think part of the problem is the backlash against the Arbiter in Halo
Hmm.
2 is so
Yeah,
strong
yeah,
that and honestly so irrational
yeah. It
that
really
when
is.
people complain about, new protagonists not being set up properly, they're just like, "Oh, it's the same Arbiter whiners
Yeah, you
again."
did same thing as you do with the Arbiter. It's like a fallback on, But
Yeah.
I don't. I don't think 5 was anywhere. No, I don't think 5 had that kind of problem. I'll put it that way. When you
Yeah,
play it, we'll have a good convo about it. But I don't think 5 was like. I don't think it was shoehorned. I just think it was like,
just not well written.
yeah, yeah.
That's fair. And I think like I don't have an Xbox, so I'm probably just gonna end up watching a Let's Play of it before Infinite comes out. Um, like I would love to play it. It's just, if I can't play a first person shooter with a mouse and keyboard, I'm just not gonna play that
It's
game.
weird to have that
Yeah.
gap when everything else seems to be going to or already on PC. It's weird to have that most recent game gap for sure.
It's like the one Xbox game they haven't ported to PC.
I know. I know. It's weird.
I'm just like, guys, I'm willing to give you money for this.
Yeah.
I want to give you money for this. Please let me. And they're like, nope. So, like, no disrespect to them. I'm gonna watch a Let's Play before Infinite comes out, and I'll probably end up playing. I probably won't end up picking Infinite up this year, but next year I'll definitely want to give it a go, and then like once the co-op update is out, then really go to town on it with some of my friends because it
Yeah.
feels like I'm also just really curious what a co-op, I guess you'd call it Metroidvania, looks like. Like, how does that even work? I want to know. We'll see. So yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to talk about today. I don't know if there's any other games
I think we've
upcoming.
covered it. I mean, the only other thing I was gonna maybe mention is that we're gonna get together the best of list next. So want to
Yeah,
maybe mention
yeah,
be ready to do some voting. Get your voting mice ready.
that's something I'm definitely gonna do in I guess we'll do that in early December and then
Yeah.
release it kind
I'm
of
not.
towards the end of the year. Um, so I will say very controversially, at least uh, for people who know my tastes, uh, Persona 5 Strikers not gonna make my year-end top 10.
Oh man.
Yeah, that
Huh.
and I didn't even dislike it. I'm just like,
Yeah.
what's also funny? Persona 5 didn't end up making my top 10 the year it came out. It was
You were
number
so
11.
excited for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was number 11.
Huh.
Just missed the top 10. So that's gonna be strange.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a little spoiler uh, going forward, and we'll see. A couple of things might drop off the list.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm ready to add some stuff to the list. Honestly, I could definitely see Jurassic World, Halo, or Battlefield sneaking onto my year-end list right at the buzzer, basically.
yeah, I, I'm gonna be honest. I think Tales of Arise is just gonna miss it.
Yeah.
Um, but I would be very shocked if like it's possible the Guardians of the Galaxy is gonna completely collapse in its second half.
Hmm.
But I like it's not a huge spoiler to say this is a good game and it's a top 10 game. So
Ah.
we'll see how that goes because this is going to be a really interesting list for me because it's a mixture of super obscure games and
And like
like
every stuff everybody
the
played. Yeah.
biggest AAA games on the planet. It's like it looks like a list made by two different people mashed together. So
Yeah.
I think people are going to be. My current game of the year is just a completely unknown game that 10 people played. So we'll see how that shakes out. Um, and whether I guess Guardians of the Galaxy or The Good Life when I finally get around to it, which I backed on Kickstarter for some reason. Don't ask me why. Uh,
Man, I forgot Kickstarter exists until Mystery Science Theater shows up on there, honestly.
yeah. So we'll see how that all goes. Anyway, so y'all know the drill. Follow us on our website, outgotogamescast@wordpress.com. Um, we have a link dump. Read it. Um, go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts to find us. You know how it works. Um, and check out the avocado at theavocado.org with a
Yeah,
hyphen
good
there.
to have
There's
you
a hyphen in
back.
there.
Good to have you
Yeah,
back, by
it's
the
been
way.
nice. I haven't done this in so long. I've kind of
I
forgotten
know.
how to do it. I was like, I'm looking through my notes, and I'm just like, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to say at that point.
We'll get back in the swing of things.
Yeah,
Probably in our
it's
4 hour long episode next month. So.
oh yeah, that's gonna be a lot of chatting it up. Um, I forgot the hyphen. Can you believe it? I've had so many jokes about that hyphen over the year.
Yeah, I'm part of the reason we have the hyphen. So direct all your complaints. We weren't sure that the website was even going to work. That was the big thing at the time. So yeah, apparently, if you throw in a hyphen and make it a .org, you can save a lot of money. So,
That makes
it's a lot
sense.
cheaper for us to renew it every month when we have a hyphen and a .org because we can't really. Well, I don't know what .org means these days, but at least when we made the website, it was like you can't use it for
Profit.
business purposes or anything. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, well, nobody's making any profit off of that. Um, can you put plus signs in a URL? Could you be like V
yeah,
plus
I,
avocado?
I don't know if I don't think if anything's off limits us except for maybe like ASCII characters, right?
Like, can you put an emoji in a URL? It could be like the hyphen poop emoji. That'd work.
I know you can use like question marks and brackets and stuff like that. I don't know what else you could maybe use.
I wonder why more corporations don't do it. Like, can you imagine www.mcdonalds.com?
Question mark at the end.
www.realbeef?
I'm guessing like the brackets probably wouldn't work because I think that's usually used for code, right?
I
I don't know.
guess. Like, could you code inject into a URL?
Oh my
Like,
god, I'm sure if you could, they'd
could you
do
do
it.
like www.droptable.com?
Just like load your URL bar forever.
Yeah, www.formatc.com. Oh man, yeah, that would cause a whole lot of stress for a lot of people. So yeah, I guess call this to a close, and we'll see you next
Yep.
time.